Back to Tales of Praxis, everybody. Here with the Terrible Fate's own Dan Hughes, as was the case on Monday, and as will be the case on Friday of this wonderful week. Sorry to be getting a little bit of a late start. We were troubleshooting.
Why?
Yeah, I think you should tell the story. You're such a good storyteller.
Apple is really good in a lot of ways when making things useful and easy, and then sometimes their products just don't work. So we found out that Aaron went out and graciously bought a adapter for my AirPod Maxes so that we could hook it up into our audio splitter so that I could hear the sound of the game on headphones instead of through headphones on the ground. But that didn't go as planned, so that's what we're doing now.
It's one thing, as I was ribbing Dan about earlier today, that Apple has decided they're too good for the 3.5mm jack that every audio device in the world uses, but then to not only have its own jack, but also just simply not work.
As if in defiance of everybody's hopes and dreams. So that was why
I guess the solution is we need an all Apple full streaming setup in order for your headphones to work at all, because that's the logical outcome.
You know, that's so crazy.
It just might work.
And I'm willing to option that story for $104,000.
Oh my god, I'm willing to option that story for just Apple leaving us alone and having their products work for the rest of our lives. How about that?
I can't guarantee it.
No, probably not. Almost certainly not.
So where we got...
What did we do last time, Dan? I always do the recap. Tell us about what happened last time.
Oh, this will be fun. What did I think the story was?
That's right. Where are we in the story? You knew there would be a quiz.
So last time we spent the last half an hour, something like that.
Maybe 45 minutes, with the difference.
Doing a chunky side quest where Emil and Richter go and find it was a tombstone, right? It's like a headstone in a ruin, so that Richter can trade that for a magical tome that has something to do with Marta, right?
Something to do with the Church of Martel.
Or Martel,
yeah.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, she wants to kill Marta. That's
yes.
That's what I'm getting at.
He has a lot of Mart-related feelings.
Yeah.
It's hard to keep track.
But in the story, we were going after another core because I think somehow the party found out that Lloyd hasn't realized yet that the cores are where the spirits were.
Right.
In the last game.
Because Lloyd is a little slow on the uptake.
Okay, so that's real then.
Yeah,
okay.
so for a player of Tales of Symphonia, that
makes
tracks.
sense. Okay,
yes.
yeah.
Yes, so
now we're going after another core.
Right. We encountered Lloyd. We were able to get the Ignis core in the Triet ruins, and Rain made the inference that they're showing up at the same places that the Summon Spirits were, which made us hopeful that we might figure out more about the relationship between the Centurions and the Summon Spirits.
Right.
Alice is one of the leaders in the Vanguard, so she's kind of a frenemy of Marta.
Because she left.
Yes, she's been hunting down Marta since Marta defected basically from the Vanguard at the beginning of the game, and she's a sadist, and that's her entire character that we have so far.
All right.
Alice, just the people I wanted to see.
Stop being weird out here.
Alice! You're Alice! You must be!
We're trying to teach in here? This is a school?
And you are?
It's me, Bernie. Don't you remember? We were in the orphanage in Haima together. I've heard a lot about you. You're some amazing bigwig in the Vanguard now, right? Looks like you're doing really well for yourself. We always knew you were destined for greatness.
Well, Mart, little pet, I'll let you off for today. Come, everyone, we're going.
She has pet names for the men she likes and the women she doesn't like.
Hey.
Lady Alice, Sir Hawk has yet to rejoin us.
Just a real
That's
bird.
fine. We'll go and meet him ourselves.
Ah, Sir Hawk.
Yes, ma'am.
What did that bird do to become a knight?
What news of the nest?
Get a load of her. A half-elf acting like she's all hot
Your
stuff.
Tales of heroism. Terrifying to my core.
Alice is a half-elf?
Yep, that girl's dangerous. She used her magic to control some monsters and destroyed the orphanage in Haima. A lot of people died.
Okay.
Why would she do that?
Hard to say. She got picked on a lot back at the orphanage for being a half-elf. Maybe it was her way of getting revenge.
A little intense, wouldn't you say?
She was a troubled kid, Dan. Don't tell me you don't know at least
Can
one
I-
kid.
Can I
who-
just
please?
Can I put on my non-game
Marta,
related
you didn't
soapbox?
know?
I watch a lot of true crime, as you know.
Right.
This whole idea, and it
No.
kind of bleeds into my gaming.
I heard that
also.
she can use
like this
magic
idea
because she
of,
uses the power of
X happened
monsters,
in
so...
your past, so we should forgive you, or that should explain it. I'm over it. I'm over it now.
Yeah.
If you did something in your past, and
You
you're
have
not,
to own up to it.
you have
100%.
to. You have to at least acknowledge and own up to it. If you
Right.
don't do that part, I'm not gonna follow it. So she burned down a whole orphanage. I'm gonna have to see some work on her side before I start trusting this lady.
You have to actually do
But
the
that
steps
Barney guy
before you're
gave me the
forgiven for
creeps.
that.
More than Alice.
Yeah, you're right. Can you believe that guy?
Or you
I
could
can't
take the funny
stand
third
two-faced
path, which she
people like that.
seems to be taking of, joining a resistance and revolutionary movement to just reshape the world in such a way that you
That
don't
it's
have
fine.
to apologize.
Yeah,
That's
that
right.
What she did was
In the New World Order, no, orphans are supposed to burn down orphanages.
I did a good thing
Yes.
by killing those orphans in a fire.
That's the big brain move.
Make it okay, Rip. Well, there's precedent for it.
Retcon your, immorality as morally righteous. I think we're just describing the real world at this point. I'm a little depressed now. All right.
So how many cores? So we have Tenebre's 1,
Tenebrae's 1.
Aqua.
Aqua's 1. She's in the wind. Lloyd made off with lumens. The one of light.
We have 2.
Yeah, we got
Ignis.
Ignis's core. And you counted Tenebrae already. Oh, and we got Ventus of wind. Yes.
Okay, so we
That's all
Kinda-
of them, I think.
there's only
Well, all
three
the
left, right?
ones that, yeah,
Yeah.
that's right. Yeah, we're on chapter 4. I think the game has 8 chapters, if I remember correctly.
It's so funny to think I'm playing this and playing through the early Final Fantasy games and not having to sink 200 hours into a JRPG is really fun.
Yeah, what's that like?
you would know on this one, I guess.
Finishing an entire game in the amount of time we would do like a first act. Yeah. Dan knows, but I started the Xenoblade Chronicles 3 DLC today, which gave me all kinds of feelings, but to know that in even a DLC, I'm sure I'll be sinking many more hours than the typical Final Fantasy story from back in the day. Alright, we've got to go back to Izoold and capture the next core, which I think is by Flanor, so charter a boat of some sort. We're back on the main story for now. Yes.
Or burning the fish or
Yes.
burning all these fish.
Better than an icy desert.
Yeah, I wouldn't want to spend time in either place.
No. That is an interesting personality question. If you had to spend time in a place that has totally inverted natural effects or ecosystem, what would it be and why?
I mean, like a humid mountaintop would be kind of cool.
I went the opposite way. I was thinking a really
cool-
arid rainforest.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Yep.
Sorry, buddy. No ships are gonna be leaving port anytime soon.
Why not?
Well,
never
you must
been
have
asked
heard
that
about
before.
that last fire we had.
I have no follow-up here.
There's not.
We don't do that here. That actually is a
If
funny
we shut
tie-in
down
with
now, he
my
might
Tales of
escape by
Symphonia
pretending to be one of
playthrough
the
because
passengers.
I couldn't figure out the order of NPCs to talk to get the boat you're supposed to get out of Izoold in that, and so I went halfway around the map trying to find another way, only to get cut off and have to go all the way back to Izoold. It was great. That was my entire second stream of my whole streaming career.
Beautiful.
What are we
Everyone
supposed to
loved
do if we're in a hurry?
We just had another fire, and you're in a hurry to leave town? Seems a little fishy to me.
No, sir, that's all the fish.
Uh-oh.
What did you say? Why don't you try saying that to my face, smart guy?
What? If you're saying you're not, then...
Then what?
I can't
This
breathe.
seems to be happening to Emil more frequently now.
Emil, stop it!
And less provocation each time.
That's true.
You can't go into Ratatosk mode here. Apologize to the guy.
Sorry I went into Ratatosk.
Right. I'm very sorry.
Yeah, sure.
So, back to the arsonist. Let's find him. Once we do, we can leave on the ship. Yeah, let's check out the jail first to see if we can find any clues.
Yeah. What's wrong with me?
Oh, lots.
Hey, Marta, does Emil really go into Ratatosk mode this often? I don't think it used to happen quite so much. I wonder if there's something keeping him on edge.
This game is stealing all my
Maybe having
pithy
my
observations.
sister and me around all the time is stressing him out. I don't think that's it, but I'll ask him. Okay, thanks.
Oh, Emil, you got a small fleck of marinara sauce on your clothes. What the fuck did you just say to me?
You know, I hate that.
You're choking me.
Did you put it there?
I'm sorry.
As you can see, I have a fish on my boat.
Was there a fish?
Yeah. Go quick. A little bit.
Oh, yeah. That looks suspiciously out of
You can
place.
talk to him. Oh. To the fish. Ah!
When in doubt, it's usually Wondershell. But it was I,
Wonder Chef.
Wonderfish.
Excuse me. I was wondering if you could tell us anything about the escaped arsonist.
Huh? The arsonist escaped?
Not a good start.
Don't be ridiculous. He's still there. See for yourself.
He is.
What's going on here? If the arsonist is still here, then the latest fire must have been started by someone else.
But
Do you
not
mind
us.
if we have a word with the
We
criminal?
didn't start the fire.
Sure, but be careful.
The arsonist.
A fancy clothed arsonist?
Is he a friend from the game before?
I'm suspicious.
And therefore he was set up by the real arsonist?
One of our best friends from the previous game. Actually, literally Lloyd's best friend based on the affinities that we got.
Regal!
Rain. Genus. What are you doing here?
Regal, why are you in jail again?
That's what we should be asking you.
Regal, it's actually a very sad story. So, we talked about Presea, right? So, Presea's sister was subject to the same, like, make an X-sphere, fancy X-sphere, Crucius crystal inside the body that Presea was. But Presea's sister, Alicia, underwent this before Presea did, and her sister, Alicia, was not, like, compatible with the experiment. So she had been sent off from their like little woodland village of Ozette to go and serve in the house of a noble. That noble was Regal.
Oh.
He was like, I think the heir to and president of this big mining company. And they fell in love. And after they fell in love because of this experiment, her body like mutated and she turned into a monster and she begged Regal to kill her. So he did that, and then he was like so guilty over it that even though everyone understood, he basically like demanded he be taken into custody for it. And so his whole character was basically being very penitent for that and trying to get over the guilt. And he has like the most super powered combat abilities in his hands, but he wore these like symbolic handcuffs to pay for his crime and fought with his feet instead.
Oh, that's cool.
Yes, very cool. One of my favorite characters. I had forgotten how much I liked him until this playthrough.
I'm embarrassed for you to see me like this.
Is this a friend of yours?
Yes, this is Regal Bryant. He was with us in the journey of world regeneration.
He's also the president of the Lezareno Company.
Mining company.
Lezareno? But they're huge. Why would their president be starting fires? So, Regal, tell us, What happened?
Well, I fell in love again, and she turned
To be
into a
honest,
monster.
I don't really know myself.
She was a
I was
fish.
in town
starting
on
to think
business
this
when
is
I happened to meet a man
Right.
named Berg, a gel maker. who
What's
said
the
he'd
common
seen more.
denominator?
That's a pretty funny idea for a story that I'm sure has been
While we were
like,
speaking,
serial killer
I
who,
suddenly found myself
just
engulfed
keeps
by
killing,
this
and
strange
everyone
light.
like he's
and just
fine.
like that, I
He's
blacked out.
all right.
Are you literally just describing the plot to you?
No, because I mean like open. Everyone.
Oh,
everyone.
they
knows
just
it.
keep making excuses for him.
Yeah, it's like no, he's a good boy. Yeah. Everyone knows it.
You don't know the whole story.
Yeah.
When I came to, the building was in flames and Berg was lying unconscious. I grabbed him and ran outside.
I guess the next season.
Where you were arrested
Yeah,
and
no,
blamed
no.
for all the fires.
Exactly. But I had nothing to do with any of it.
Of course, we would never think you would. So you wouldn't know anything about the most recent fire?
I don't know you, and I seem to
now.
have some shit going on, so anything goes with me.
Frankly, I don't like any of you people.
What? There was another fire?
We're looking for the person that started it.
Yeah, well, you said that, and like now I'm seeing how physically distanced he is from the rest of the group, including Marta.
Arson is one of the most cowardly crimes. If I could leave this prison, I would gladly join you in your search.
The man you met, Berg, he didn't vouch for you?
Unfortunately, he's still out cold. He may have inhaled a lot of smoke during the fire.
Hey, Marta, do you think you might be able to use healing arts to help Berg?
I'm not sure, but it's worth a shot.
Then let's go. If we can get him to wake up, maybe we can clear Regal's name.
Good idea. Let's do that.
Okay.
I was told I'm the leader of the group.
I heard Berg was taken to his house. Please,
like that.
do anything you can.
I'm sensing a shift in power.
Hey, Genus, could you tell me a little about Regal?
Well, we got to know him when he traveled with us on the journey of world regeneration 2 years ago. He's the type of guy you can always depend on.
And as president of the world-famous Lazareno company, he's well-respected wherever he goes.
But he was a prisoner the first time we met him, too. What? It almost seemed like he started to enjoy being locked up.
I wish you were joking, but I think you might be onto something there. He's mentally exhausted. We have to do something, and quickly.
I'm mentally exhausted, he says.
As his mind melts into sludge.
I'm Regal. I'm tired in my brain.
Please, my brain. I would be mentally exhausted too. For like ever after having to kill the monstrous mutation of the person I love.
Yeah,
It's enough to knock
Rain,
you out for a
what do
few
you
years.
think?
From the looks of it, he might have been poisoned by a light frog.
A light frog? Ah, yes, that's what you humans call it. What strange names you have for things.
Your name is literally Tenebrae.
Hang on, what is he gonna say it is?
Yes, this man has been infected by the poison of the Nasdrovier, the monster your people call the light frog.
Worth it?
It's called a here have a drinky.
The Bandroggle Woggletum.
Nostrovia? Light frog?
What a strange choice of
Nasdrovier
words.
is the proper
Of the
term.
genus
Light frog is the
Wendelbaum.
term you humans call it. The Nasdrovier absorbs high amounts of energy and releases it in a burst of light and heat. It's enough to knock out any creature that touches it.
Light and heat. Then that must be what's causing all the fires around here.
What's that darn light frog?
Of course, it must be the light frog.
Monsters.
It's called the Nasdrovier.
Real monsters.
If I remember correctly, the light frog is a rare species that only lives near Flanor.
It's the Nostrovia.
Nasdrovier.
Izoold has a trade route with Flanor. The creatures could have arrived in cargo bound for here, then flourished due to the unusual weather conditions.
So assuming this is the result of light frog poison, an antidote ought to cure him, right?
Nasdrovier.
Unfortunately, there's no antidote for the light frog's poison. It's more of a viral infection rather than a venom.
I believe Rosemary is able to counter the light frog's poison.
Poor Tenebrae.
Tenebrae, you're giving in?
Just leave me alone.
But where do we find some rose?
I'm going to journal in the darkness.
It used to grow wild in the Camberto caves, but I heard it became extinct with the recent climate changes.
Great. What do we do now?
Well, we know what caused the fires. Let's explain the situation so we can leave by ship.
But what about Berg? And we can't just leave Regal in jail like that.
I don't like it either, but the most important thing right now is to find the
Jill's his
Centurion's
favorite.
cores as soon as possible, correct?
Rain, how could you say something like that?
It's our only choice. We've done everything we can here.
But I can't just ignore someone who's suffering right in front of me.
Then what do you propose we do? Keep in mind that Lloyd could be taking the Centurion's cores as we speak.
Shut up! I'm gonna beat the piss out of Lloyd!
And what if he plans to use the cores to hurt others?
Shut up!
Rain! I can't believe you! Wasn't Lloyd your student? Your friend?
I'm merely pointing out a possibility.
Be a man. I say we find a cure.
Oh yeah, the whole first arc of the first act of the game was also Marta and Richter bullying Emil about how he needed to be a man.
And how exactly do you plan on doing that?
Yeah.
Please, you don't even
Over
have the
and over.
means.
Of course you would. Yeah, look
Yeah.
We just have to find it in those damn Camberto
I think
caves.
he figured out how to be a man.
How can you be so sure that they're all gone?
And what about the Centurion's cores?
Shut up. We're the ones who need to find all the cores. What do you care?
Please don't talk to me.
All right then, let's go to the
I'm a
Camberto
teacher.
caves.
Not your teacher, but I'm a teacher.
I want
Rain?
more lines in JRPGs.
I apologize. Please forget everything I said.
Responses.
Come on, let's go.
Please don't talk to me.
But then the plot would never go anywhere because every line of dialogue is so stilted.
Just Rain going, I don't want to be around you anymore.
I'm going back to Azalea.
I don't need
I
this.
don't-
I'm gonna be honest, I don't care about the Centurion stuff.
Why don't you call me when you grow up?
I think she was trying to provoke Emil on purpose.
Why would she do that?
Well, she is a scientist.
I don't know.
Maniac. A ruin mode.
As a joke, to study Ratatosk mode. Maybe if I learn about his mode, I can understand my own.
I must confess, you continue to fascinate me. If we could only tap into your memories, the mysteries of the ancient world would be at our disposal.
It's incredible how dramatically Rain changes from moment to moment.
Is it? I barely
Said the
notice
pot
anymore.
to the kettle.
What I thought was odd was when she was needling you with all those questions earlier. Really? The way she is now seems a lot weirder than that. I don't know. There was something very curious
So
about her
I remember
interest in you.
you told
No
me.
way. She was
I think this was off
definitely
stream.
weirder
You told
just
me that
now. Genius.
Originally, the
Marta,
people who
may
made this
I
game
ask
wanted
what
to
you
make
find
it like
so
hundreds
odd,
of years
very
in the future.
curious and definitely
So,
weird about me?
Do you think that
Nothing at all.
that was like a misstep going back and playing this, or do you think that this works, being a kind of more progressive?
I think that the thing that's more frustrating to me
Did you visit the place
than
we're heading to
anything,
right now during
and
your
this is
journey
like
of
a very
regeneration?
superficial
No,
observation,
we did our fair
is
share
just
of
the fact that
traveling then, but there were
I forget
plenty
whether I
of
told you
places we
this,
didn't
but
see.
like
Really?
a decent
Well,
amount
it's
of the
not like we
cast
were
was
sightseeing,
recast in
but
terms
I'm
of their
pretty
voice
sure we
actors,
passed
You did
through
tell me
but
all
not
of those
everyone.
towns.
Yeah, so that's
Oh.
kind of like
I just figured
that
you guys had pretty
inconsistency
much been
makes
here
it
for
hard
where
for
there
me
is
to
to
kind
go.
of buy
I
into the
think
continuity
Tenebrae's
of the
seen more of
world.
the world than we
But I think in
have.
terms of the bigger
He's been
picture
alive
storytelling
a
decision,
really
I
long
mean,
time.
If you insist on
I
treating me
do-
like a senile old
I think I
buffoon,
like the
have
way that
nothing
this
to
is
say to you.
framed because
He's
so
very
often
sensitive about
in a
his
JRPG,
age.
right? And we see this in
Still,
the
it
Tales
can't be
games all
much
the
longer
time. Like
before all his
there's
fur goes
a
white.
historical period
Oh,
earlier than the game
especially
where there were
coming
these
from someone
heroes who
with a
did this
full
thing
head
and the
of
world
white
became the
hair.
way it was.
It's
And then kind
silver.
of over the course of the
Both
story,
so
your
crouching.
characters become similar, mythological heroes that do everything in terms of saving the world and fighting God or whatever, right? And then so often at the end of the game, it's just like the end of a hero's journey, right? And I think having this just a couple of years after that, where those people are kind of living in the world that they created, but also sort of trying to be ordinary people and having gone their own way, and they're very much more like kind of guest stars in this party who weave in and out of the story as opposed to it even being their story. That's like, it's an interesting character study for me in terms of, you know, like what is it for saviors to just go on living after they've done something like that. So we don't see that often, you know?
No, I can think of, there's Final Fantasy IV does, I think it's called The Lost Years, which is similar. Final Fantasy X-2, you could say Advent Children does it.
Sure.
But
Advent Children almost anti-does that though, because they try to,
with the same people.
and they try to live their lives only to like immediately have to defeat
back
the
in
same
them,
nemesis. Yeah.
But I think that I can't think of anything outside of Final Fantasy that does it. But I like it because I think that, especially in JRPGs, you have these huge world-ending problems.
Yeah.
And then to see the direct aftermath of how people would live with the changes that makes is really interesting to me.
Totally.
And I like it when it's like hundreds of years later, but then usually I find that in those hundreds of years later stories, they take you back to like this period anyway to show you like, oh yeah, the impetus for the story of this game is what happened directly after the first game.
Yeah, and I feel that way about it too, where like, especially when the Tales games are so often structured, like I said, with there being a story of why the world is as it is, like hundreds or thousands of years in the past, like if you structured a sequel to Tales of Symphonia like that, it would be just, for all intents and purposes, another Tales game that has nothing that much to do with Tales of Symphonia except the nominal connection, right? I think this is a better way of trying to develop that continuity between the games. Kind of like, I mean, you know, we were talking a lot about like the Legend of Zelda because off stream, you know, we were catching up on that interview that Camus and I did with Sean McGarry, the creator of Hero's Purpose, last week, talking about his work and just the general Zelda timeline. But I think, you know, part of what's interesting about that is not just the timeline, but like the gaps and the windows it creates that invites you to think about like what the hero did when you don't have that direct insight into it, right? Like Link leaving and then ultimately going through whatever he went through to reappear as the hero shade in Twilight Princess and things like that. Right? I think that's much more interesting than kind of just setting the cycle over without looking.
There
at
doesn't
those,
seem to be any
interstitials.
here. Let's keep going.
Rain?
Yes?
You made Emil mad on purpose earlier. Why did you do that?
Oh, I wasn't lying when I said I wanted to hurry our journey along.
Rain!
Emil, you probably won't like this, but Lloyd once said something similar.
Huh?
How can we go on a quest to regenerate the world if we can't even save the people standing right in front of us?
Lloyd said that?
But I hate Lloyd.
Come on, let's keep
I
moving.
hate myself.
Oh no.
Oh,
Shucks.
I don't want to be around me anymore.
Is it just me, or did she avoid the question entirely?
Yeah.
Why?
Oh, genius, you know your sister.
She's nuts.
This area has a lot of herbs.
You're right.
Herbs? I've never liked them much.
Why's that?
Well, they smell weird for one
I
thing.
just like
And they're
bland
usually
meat.
too spicy or bitter for me.
I'm very
Just don't
vanilla.
taste good.
I
You
guess
should
you're
know
still
this
a
about
I don't
me.
want any
chocolate
taste.
I am?
As you get older, you learn to appreciate the more bitter flavors.
Yes, darkness and bitterness are the two principal flavors of adulthood.
Jesus Christ.
I don't think darkness is technically a flavor. In other words, since
It's the
Tenebrae's
spice of
essentially one
life.
of darkness, that means he's old.
Please don't be mean to me. I'm very
I'm
cool.
trying to help you all. I can leave.
I don't care.
Die, scum!
Swallow once!
Are you back on something? No, it does that. As a joke.
Healing power.
Covered in mushrooms.
Won't work!
You never leave.
Healing power. Won't work.
It's over!
Thinking about eras and connections between games and their sequels, do you have like a favorite trope for amount of time or kind of follow-up between?
Was anyone surprised?
I'm trying to think of other games I like that do it. I think I tend to like if it's a condensed story like a trilogy or something, like I'm thinking of Jack and Daxter. I like it to be like within maybe the whole trilogy takes place in 3 episodes. Okay, I think that's
Oh, healing power.
But then another thing I also like where it's like 50 years and, or maybe like 10 years
Yeah, thanks for shouting it out. Did it switch back to auto feed?
I think it did, yeah.
What the hell?
Oh no, I'm in. Yeah, it did.
Wow, I don't understand how to fix this. Thanks for calling out the audio. Let us know if it's better now. I tried to switch the settings a little bit. What were you saying?
I also like if you're following it like that part instead of 10 or 15 years later, you're following a different group of people, a different person, but obviously the person you followed in the first story is still around, and so it's kind of like a mystery of what that person is doing. Kind of like, I mean, what's happening with Lloyd in this one?
Yeah, that's a little of what we're doing here.
I find it compelling when that is the way that the story goes, where it's like, all right, people might not even know what that person did, but it's they're here and they're being nuts.
I like that. I changed the balance again, so just call it out in the next battle if it's better now. We can change it 8 ways to Sunday. Appreciate it. I'm wondering if it resets on the main navigation menu. So if I do that, maybe it'll persist
I feel like
across
that's what we did
battles.
last time.
Yeah, I think that's right. Yeah, I think I don't know about my favorite kind of sequel, but the kind that most annoys me, and I haven't really seen this happening so far in Dawn of the New World versus the original Tales of Symphonia. Oh, good. Looks like we got it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Cheers. Truly, I have no live way of knowing, so that's very helpful. And we have a less than ideal mic situation for 2 people, so we're doing it live, as they say. But yeah, I think the thing that most grinds my gears in the other direction in terms of sequels is just when a sequel goes out of its way to retcon things that really seem unjustified in the original. We've talked about this with Dishonored and Dishonored 2. That's my favorite example. Just I will never get over or be happy with Dishonored 2 because I feel like it changed way too much about just the identity of Corvo and how he engages with the world, and the way it imported sort of a sideshow character from DLC as the main threat in the sequel and stuff like that. So I feel like that kind of thematic continuity and fidelity to the characters is really important. You really have to understand the characters and the stakes of the original game, I think, to follow up on it in a worthwhile way. And I feel like that's rarer than it ought to be, especially in games where so much of what's going to compel you, I think, to play a sequel as a player who has experienced it and had input into the first game is your personal connection with it. So I think the stakes are all the higher for having that continuity in the first place.
I think that
did we figure out how to solve it? Were you able to input things that time?
Oh yeah, I got it.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think that one of the sequels that I'm really excited for, kind of on that token of something happened at the end of the first one, and now you have to make a choice, or the developers have to make a choice. Do we consider that choice canon and then move in this direction and tell that story, or do we try to retcon something? So something that I'm really excited for and really hopeful for is this new Mass Effect game that they're putting out.
Oh.
Because
I didn't even have that on my radar, I don't think.
Because they did Andromeda, which I thought was interesting, but people did not like.
Right.
And also wasn't a direct sequel to the first 3.
Yeah.
This one is, and it seems like it's going to be like, okay, we're a number of years in the future, a lot has changed, so what it does, I think, is that it gives you a re-entree into the world, because you have to pick up on all the things that have changed.
Yeah.
Like, you didn't see it happen.
Yeah.
So you're familiar with it maybe in terms of the terms, like what's going on with people's language, but you're not familiar with, like, all the political history and all of the fallout from certain events that have happened. And that's
so
what
you have context, but you're simultaneously playing catch-up.
Yes, in a way that makes it feel new.
I like that. That's a little bit of what we've been seeing in the sequel.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Same with 10-2, which is the one that off-stream last night I was like, this really reminds me of that.
Right. Yeah, I think whether it's like a remake or a sequel or any kind of innovation like that, I mean, we talk about this all the time, but it's so hard to toe that line between old and new, where it feels like it was worth your time to play the sequel because it did something different, but it still connects with and resonates with the thing that came before it that you really loved. It's kind of why I feel bad for the people who make these, because I feel like you're damned if you do, damned if you don't. People are always going to be mad at you. Either you take too many risks and deviate too much, or it's just too samey and it feels like you're repackaging the same game.
Yep.
Invites the question of what people really want at the end of the day.
And then they want more of the same but different, and then they get angry when they get what they want.
Right.
I think it's a special thing in the JRPG space because there's such big stories. JRPGs and then like games like Mass Effect, which are massive science fiction stories, where it's like Star Trek.
Yeah, so effectively a JRPG.
Yeah, pretty much.
Maybe it's
For
because
all
of the
intents and
water running
purposes.
through here. It's really chilly.
But it's not frozen. The water must not be that cold.
Why don't we push you in and find out?
That makes sense to me.
I'm going Ratatosk mode.
Too cold one minute and too hot the next. Human beings are very inconvenient.
What if we were to stamp you all out?
In front of a train.
How rude. I have senses too, I'll have you know.
Smell.
What sort of senses?
Touch?
I can sense when it's dark. Darker or especially.
I think that's better than our jokes.
You're the Centurion of Darkness?
Can't we all kind of do that? This isn't just normal darkness. This is advanced darkness.
That's true. I guess that's just like, it's not even sight. That's like basic light sensitivity. Can blind people do that? I feel like I don't know. I should know that.
That's a good question. I don't know. Can a blind person use
Have
other
a sense
senses?
of, yeah, how like light or dark it is in general? I feel like we should know though.
I know. I say we don't look it up.
No.
we just ponder it.
That's much more interesting.
Yeah. So on the subject of sequels too, like then you have a game like Nier, right? Which is a totally different direction.
You say a game like Nier as if there's more than one game that fits that.
Nier and Nier Automata.
Yeah, okay, fine. A game in Yoko Taro's likeness.
I'm trying to think of games that do what that does, where it's like it is definitely the same world, just X number of years hence.
Yeah. Kind of like the flavor of a spiritual successor, even though
it's not.
Place, yeah.
I mean, I was saying, so Octopath Traveler and Octopath Traveler 2 have kind of like a flair of that, but it's not in the sense of... actually, I guess, weirdly, they're kind of closest to Nier in the sense of, like, this is the same world, but there's no connective tissue apart from, like, maybe one or two things.
Okay.
Because it's not like, hey, remember those 8 travelers that saved the world 500 years
right.
ago? Like, that doesn't pop up anywhere
I see.
in the sequel. It's just kind of the same world with all the same mechanics.
I feel like, at least on some people's interpretations, like Breath of the Wild is kind of like that relative to other Zelda games, right? Because it kind of has that spiritual successor vibe, but some people think it follows up on one timeline or another in particular
Or a brand
ways.
new one.
Yeah. Oh, I see.
Big
It's
flower time.
reusable. Biggest flower time. Flower power.
Flower. Yep.
Welcome to the 60s.
You got it. All right. Big mantis folk.
If we're not careful, they will marry us and then eat our heads.
If we're lucky, you mean.
That's right. To each his own.
Please.
I hope that registered. No, of course not. That'd be too easy.
The second.
I'll just hang out with my 0 hit points.
That's fine, I guess.
Living the dream. Okay, while we're doing games in similar worlds, what's your favorite kind of follow-up? Sequel, prequel, trilogy? Do you have a favorite structure for getting more windows into a story that you know and love really well?
That's a good one, because I love Final Fantasy and how it's basically just tropes and romanticism aesthetics
Yes.
persist. And I love Zelda for the same reason. It's like a lot of the same things, same basic world, same characters, all that stuff. But I think I appreciate straight up sequel more because I think like you look at a game like Kingdom Hearts and how it's just unapologetically like its own story forever and it hasn't tried to reboot or do anything.
Yeah.
I think that's way more interesting to me. It's like with horror movies. If you make 8 horror movies in the same franchise and at no point are you trying to reboot it, like the Chucky series, I have way more respect for you.
That is kind of impressive.
Yeah.
Even if you're not equally happy with all the entries.
Exactly.
It's just a certain force of will required to do something like that.
And that's kind of how I feel with Kingdom Hearts, where it's like they're not all my favorite, but I like all of it and the risks it takes, because I think that the stakes get higher when you don't throw things away and you have to remain in continuity. It's why I love Star Trek so much. Like, good Star Trek will make little continuity nods to things from the 60s, and it makes sense in like an ongoing world of Starfleet and everything.
Yeah, it's almost like, and I think this is true for many projects, it's like you need a historian of the fiction on staff in order to just keep track of everything that you want to reference or tie into.
I think it makes it that much more rewarding when you realize that kind of stuff too, like when certain things fit together better. So I think straight up sequel in like an ongoing saga, I'm a big fan of that.
So since you are, for the benefit of any viewers who don't know, the resident Kingdom Hearts expert in all of the good and bad senses of the term for With a Terrible Fate, I know at least half of your answer to this question, but favorite and least favorite follows up in the series, and why?
Well, my favorite follow-up is
sequel or otherwise.
Yeah, so my favorite follow-up, I would say, is 2, because of the way that it opened the world up. But it's kind of a tie between that and Birth by Sleep for the same reason, because they both open the world in these incredible ways for new stories to be told. Least favorite, I think, is probably, and I don't even hate it, it's just like, it's the one that I never go back to, is Coded. Okay. Because Coded is just, it's what people thought Chain of Memories was, like this rehash of a story with not a whole lot to add to it. I would say Chain of Memories adds a whole lot more to the story and does a whole lot more for the story.
Well, it amazes me because I think you've told me that in terms of the popular conception of Chain of Memories before, but I probably told you in my weird history of just the order in which I got consoles, it was actually my first one. So I was very lost playing that game for the first time. But maybe for that reason, like, I really felt as though there were so many things going on in that game that were really interesting and distinctive, and just gave a feel that was not the same thing as Kingdom Hearts, not the same thing as Kingdom Hearts 2, and kind of unique within the broader series. Right?
Yeah, I think it's the kind of entry that they needed to go as long as it did. I think I said this in my canon piece probably like a million years ago.
Yeah.
But if they hadn't tested the waters with a lot of the story elements they were exploring in Chain of Memories, then Kingdom Hearts wouldn't be where it is.
Yeah.
And I think that's... It added a lot of mystery and kind of intrigue that was just enough to kind of get you interested without leaving you frustrated.
Yeah.
Which is a totally alien concept nowadays. But yeah, I think Coded, on the other hand, like, it's literally the story of how the teaser to Kingdom Hearts 3 came around. So there's not a whole lot of meat on the bone, and I think that it's just not worth...
But in my head, too, as someone who still, I will happily admit on this stream, has never played Coded, I hear you say that, and then I feel like it's kind of the worst of both worlds, because here you are telling me it's just a rehash, but then for me, I remember when I played Dream Drop Distance, like, there were key things that they were calling up that were just from Coded, and it was like 1 or 2 plot points, but it was things that they were harkening back to in a way where, despite having been like a longtime fan of the series and played all the other games, I felt in the dark just because I hadn't taken the extra time to like be dedicated enough to play this rehashed mobile game initially, right?
Before it was on mobile first. And it was on mobile first, and then it was recoded on the 3D or the DS.
Right.
And then they made it into a movie like they did with 358 and a half days.
Yeah.
And I think, like, watch the movie, you know? Like, there's enough in there that's interesting, but it's not worth the gameplay, I don't think. But I think, as you're saying, there's, like, a lot of plot points. They can be summed up in, like...
a couple sentences and a synopsis thing in the next game, which I think is what they did.
Yeah. And even in Dream Drop Distance, there's these optional like memories that you can go into that are like, this is what we mean. So it's like that's all you need.
That's what I have in mind.
So yeah, I think. But again, I don't think it's terrible. I just think it's like you don't need to play that one. Where I would say that pretty much everyone else is worth playing.
Even 358 and a half days? Is that the right number of days?
Yeah.
You'd say that's worth playing?
Absolutely. Yeah. Because you get to play as the organization. You get to...
Okay.
Yeah. You get to...
that's fair.
You get all their different like weapons and abilities, and you get to know them. And I think like the movie does a good job of it, of like seeing the other side of these villain characters.
Yeah.
But what I loved about the game is that you would go on missions with them, and you would get all this flavor text with the different characters. So it made it... it fleshed it out a lot more, and I think... the gameplay was pretty fun on the DS.
That's fair when you put it that way. I remember kind of wanting to pull my hair out when I finally played it, because I don't know if it was the mission structure or the inventory management, which struck me as pretty restrictive relative to the other games. Yeah, but I remember having this weird kind of double-sided disappointment about it personally, because I recognized that the story was really interesting, and we were seeing these other sides to these characters, and Shion was introduced there, right?
Yep.
Yeah, so I mean, forget about it. That was all great, but I felt like the gameplay loops, at least for me, and kind of the gameplay that I enjoy, were almost keeping me at arm's length from that in a way that felt like alienating and very un-Kingdom Hearts, because in basically every other one of the Kingdom Hearts games, I felt
into it.
I was drawn in by the gameplay.
I think that's definitely a weak point in it, but I would say that it does. Like, let me put it this way: there's no mechanic like getting to play as the other organization members in Coded. Like, it's just your Sora. And, you know, you're in the data.
So it doesn't even have that saving grace.
No. So I think they're both fine as the movies that they put together. And if the gameplay is off-putting for you with the DS, I would say, like, just watch the movie. It does a good job of it.
Yeah.
But I think that, like, it's one of those that I'm glad it came out the way it did. And you also have to remember, that was after a drought of Kingdom Hearts games. 358.5 Days was the first one to come back after Kingdom Hearts 2. And so...
What was the, like, how many years in between them?
4 or 5. It was a long time, especially after this era of, like, cliffhanger was in both games. So I think people were pretty anxious. And when it came out, it kind of let people know, like, we're still doing stuff with this.
Much like the wonderful secret ending of Dream Drop Distance, this leads to Kingdom Hearts 3.
Not so secret anymore.
I loved it. It was great.
Yeah. But yeah,
worth all the hours of collecting whatever you have to collect.
That's the long-winded way of my saying. I think it's more interesting when they take chances like that. I don't like constant remakes and, you know, like even the new God of War games are brilliant because they don't throw anything away. It's just that it's a clear break where you can enter it if you want, but you get so much out of it if you've played the other ones too.
Yeah.
And I think that that's such a smart way of doing it.
I think that's one of the things that I love about, you know, games and talking about these stories as a communal experience too, is you think about something like even Kingdom Hearts, but especially God of War, right, where they have these different layers for different points of entry and different players, and it's like you get a whole other like depth or perspective on the series by talking with someone who entered it at a different point than you did.
It's awesome.
Like I got some of this actually at PAX East talking with Xenoblade fans, or like the DLC for Xenoblade Chronicles 2, right, is this prequel to what happens in the main game, and it came out afterwards, so it was like sort of more insight into a story that players already knew. But some of the people were telling me afterwards that they actually played that first and then went back to and played like the story of Xenoblade Chronicles 2. It's like a totally different experience and different notes hit and such like ways that you would never know unless that were your experience or you talked to someone who did that.
I feel like every argument in video games is more personal than some other medium.
Sure.
Or some other media, but I would say that the question of like which order should I play these in is such an interesting one, because you and I think I'm pretty sure we're aligned on like play them as they came out, because that's an interesting way to see how things develop from a meta perspective.
I agree with that. Yeah.
But there's plenty of people who are like, no, I want the story from the start. So, like I'm doing something that's weird for me in my Yakuza playthrough, where I started with Yakuza 0, which is a fun like prequel that shows things.
Yeah.
I should not have started with it, like in my ethos of playing games. But
so what pushed you to start with that?
I think because it's on the PS4, and I was like, oh, I'll just start from all the remakes and stuff. But
thanks.
I don't know. I know as I'm doing it that I'm getting a different perspective on the story than I would have if I played like the first one and then 2, and then as they kind of came out.
And I think the key is that they are just two different perspectives, but I don't know. I mean, even thinking about something like Kingdom Hearts, right? Like I know people who would say start with Birth by Sleep, and I can't wrap my head around how the series would make sense to you with how much of it is like unified by this auteur who's expressing something and telling it in the order that it's presented.
Yeah.
Right. I feel like for all the difficulties in following like the story and what's going on already, like you would think that would be easier by putting it in chronological order, but I think that's almost a testament to that kind of game where it's so like out of time and interested in things other than chronology that you kind of further confuse yourself or tie yourself up if you're trying to prioritize.
That might be why
way.
People joke about it. Like, same with Zelda too. Like, I don't understand the Zelda timelines. Like, you don't have to. You can just play the games.
Right. That's what they were going for. Right? In the words of the Book of Mormon.
Yeah.
Maybe that's what you were going for.
Are intra-party relationships off limits?
It's not that. Such
Tenebrae HR.
That's right.
Any response should be vague, so as to create intrigue and suspense.
Let me explain to you how nubile JRPG relationships work for the adolescents.
On the topic of sequels, because my my experience with Tales is literally just a rise, and then like the times I've played some of the games with you, and that's a game where I think like I'm curious about your perspective, because I feel like we've talked about it, but I can't remember. Where it's like that feels like one where they could easily make a sequel that would have a lot of interesting connective tissue, make it build on it. But do you kind of feel like that's true of any of them?
That's exactly what I was going to say.
Yeah.
I would say yes. I think one of the things that pulls me back to these games is that they don't just include a bunch of people as placeholders in their party, as is the case sometimes with the JRPG, but they really do thoughtful character studies, not only of each individual party member, but also of their relationships. So I feel like you could take any one of them and say, like, oh, let's follow up on these characters in the world that they created or the world that they engaged with in a sequel. So yeah, I think that's kind of bittersweet, right? Because obviously only ones with a certain profile of success or, you know, something that aligns with the studio's objectives is going to actually get a sequel. And there's been more than one that has in the Tales universe. Yeah. But I think that almost makes it all the sadder for those
that don't get picked.
Yeah. But kind of like...
It's like Final Fantasy too, right?
Yeah, like Final Fantasy.
There's plenty of people who want an 8-2 compared to a 13-2.
Yeah, no kidding. But I think there's something special about the ones that stand on their own as well, right? Like, I think Tales of the Abyss is the kind of game where, like we're saying, you know, you could do a sequel and there'd be plenty of interesting stuff to do, but it tells such a tight and complete and sort of mystifyingly compelling story on its own terms that you almost don't want to explore more fact of the matter plot about what happens next. Similar to, you know, if we're trading with Final Fantasy, like a Final Fantasy 9, right? That's such a, like, classic and complete story that's sort of more about the themes of the story than the characters and what they do with their lives. And so you could peer in on them and, you know, like everyone loves Vivi and it'd be interesting to see his relationships with his kids or something, but it's not like you need that in order to yeah, exactly. Yeah, you don't gain that much in playing that versus imagining it, I think is
it's like my biggest casualty of the PlayStation era, Legend of Dragoon. Like, that's a game where I feel like all that was preventing it from having a sequel was success.
That's always
because
a disappointing feeling.
It's such a good... It's a great story where it doesn't feel like it leaves anything unanswered, but the world is so fleshed out and so rich, and the fighting system is so fun, and like they could have easily made it like a Final Fantasy, but
on the other side of that, speaking of what you were talking about earlier, I felt sort of the opposite sense of joy with Nier Automata, and I think a lot of people did, because it was the kind of thing that was, I think, sufficiently under the radar in terms of popular reception that it became a, you know, a really cult classic, where the people who played it and knew it back in the day after it came out in, I want to say, what, 2010, were like, we're like, wow, this is, you know, so thoughtful, and the world is so rich, and it could be expanded in so many different directions, to say nothing of its existing antecedent connections with Drakengard, but you know, there's no way it's popular enough for that to ever happen. Then, bam, and then it does. You get Nier Automata, which is sort of against all odds one of the most critically acclaimed and popularly successful games of its generation. And it was like Christmas, right? Yeah. When you expect a game is just going to require you to leave it at that, when it could go further, and then suddenly you get to play more of it. That's a really cool
feeling. Bayonetta's kind of that way. There's a lot of games like that where it's like the little engine that could, where somehow just... Octopath kind of was like that, too. Yeah.
I never expected that to be the sort of thing that would get a sequel.
Sure. I thought it was like a flash in the pan, look at this well-made retro thing that we did, but...
Did it just end up having a lot of popular success? Do you know the story of how it got the sequel?
Really big in Japan.
Okay.
And well enough over here for... I think well enough over here, and also Square Enix, you know, for all that we rag on them sometimes, they're not dummies. They recognize that the... I mean, they just put out the Pixel remaster for the PS4 and the Switch.
Right.
And they did the PC version last year. Like, they recognize that there's a huge market for people who, you know, people our age who have disposable income now, who are like, well, I want to play the games that I played, and I can't play them anywhere. Please give them to me.
For sure, yeah. So it's like a retro callback in that sense?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And I think there's a huge market for... I know there's a huge market for that kind of retro style. And yeah, I think it just did. It did well enough, and there's probably somebody at Square Enix and the higher ups who also really liked it, which in Square Enix's world means it's gonna get another sequel.
Right.
It's typically how they operate.
I loved that thing you were telling me the other day when we were talking about pixel art, in terms of that idea that because it's like less verisimilitudinous, is that a word? Or less realistic?
I think that's right. I think that is the word.
I think grammatically speaking, that would be the word, at least if it were to be an adjective.
Yeah.
But the idea that, you know, it looks, yeah, we'll stick with it.
Yeah.
It's less verisimilitudinous.
Yeah.
And in that sense, because it less directly represents the real world, it almost like a book, it invites you to imagine more and fill out the world with your own mind. And I think that is something that, like, strikes me as deeply capturing something that's special about, like, the literary value of video games. And like many games with great graphics now also tell great stories, you know, in the same way that movies and other realistic media do. But I think there is something special to like that literary quality of a game. I remember, you know, even thinking about like, there are so many pixel games like this that just sort of mystify and entrance people, like the way that Max talks about Earthbound on the site, you know. And I feel like it's harder to get that sense of just almost being entranced by a game when the focus is on really realistic graphics.
I totally agree, and I think it's like, I'll put it to you that
That was too easy.
I will watch The Matrix a million times because Neo is like that too. Like, I think the strength of Keanu Reeves as an actor is that he's a blank slate. He's like a tabula rasa character.
Sure.
And because that character is such a broad dream that a lot of people have to make it a... You know, if it was like Tom Cruise or Will Smith was up for Neo, I don't know if you knew that.
No.
Can you imagine how much that would have... Not because Will Smith's a bad actor, he's a fine actor.
But he brings so much character to the role.
It would have been so different.
He's defined.
And I think Keanu Reeves kind of understood, like, I'm just every man. I'm Mr. Anderson.
I'm Luke Skywalker.
Exactly. Luke Skywalker, yeah, Mark Hamill too. So I think, like, that's what pixel games do for me, where I think... I was thinking about this when I was playing Octopath Traveler 2 recently, which is, I thought in the moment that I'm going to go back and play it again.
Yeah.
And I don't get that with a lot of modern games with beautiful graphics that I love. Like, it took me 2 years to do a full playthrough of FF7 Remake, which is a game I love.
Yeah.
But, like, there is something about... I think I played in that time Final Fantasy VII, the original, like 2 or 3 times.
Really?
Yes.
Wow.
And I think that there's something about, like, that literary experience that you're talking about, where you just kind of are like, this is also my story that I made, that draws you back to it a little bit more.
Well, and also when so much of it is dependent on your imagination and building out the world in a way that is harder when you have those higher fidelity graphics, I think it's easier to go back to the game right away because... Like, even if the graphics are the same, they're so far from representational, and so you can fill out the world in a totally different way. Yeah. And therefore, even if your memory of it is really recent, it can be like a whole other story on your next playthrough of it, even if you make the same choices or whatever.
Especially if you go into it with, like, and this is fun for modern games too, which is there's just so many games. On the slim chance that I play a game again nowadays, it's usually with the mindset of, I'm going to go into it with this lens. And that's fun to do on the older games too, because I'll talk with my brother Matt all the time about, like, he'll just message me out of nowhere where he's like, hey, I was playing Final Fantasy 3, and I was thinking about it from, like, you know, are we actually doing the right thing? You know,
Yeah.
And he was saying how he got so much more out of certain lines and things.
Well, because we talk about this all the time
Like
in
shows.
watching TV. Yeah, I was gonna say not video games, but like for viewers' benefits, we have to be
between us.
We have to be some of like maybe single-digit people who have seen Breaking Bad the most times, not as a brag, but just because like
we just watch it all the time.
We will put it on in the background for any reason or no reason, like once a day, let alone once a week or once a month.
Yeah. Like if you ever get choice paralysis on Netflix, I'll just put Breaking Bad on.
Yeah, and it's always the right choice.
Yeah, it is.
But for instance, I think for both of us, probably our favorite like recent one of this in our adult life was actually of all times when we were preparing a presentation for PAX West. We were like, we need something on in the background while we work and put together these slides. Let's watch Breaking Bad, but think through like, what if Walt is just the biggest incel edgelord in the world?
Yeah. What if he's the dumbest guy on the planet who keeps getting lucky? And that's still how I watch it. That's
Me too.
my default to
I
this
think
day.
we stumbled on the right reading of Breaking Bad in that way.
Because everybody treats Heisenberg as this genius, but if you watch it as much as we do. You're like, I don't know if he's actually that
he's
smart.
Deeply not a genius.
If he's just really lucky and evil.
And I think BCS has only, further emphasized how dumb he is.
Yeah.
It makes me think that Vince Gilligan agrees with us that Walt was not that smart and he wanted to just further hammer people over the head with it.
I think we talked about this, but Vince Gilligan actually came out and he said, it was like around the time of the Better Call Saul finale.
Yeah.
And he was like, obviously I love Breaking Bad. It's my baby. And when we wrote it, we were on Walt's side the whole time. And he's like, but I went back and I watched it, start to finish with what I'm doing with Better Call Saul and where we're ending it. And he's like, and I kind of think, I made a real monster here.
It's
so
like
even the
it's
creator,
like the story of Frankenstein but in real life with creating a story.
He's like, not like I made a mistake, but like, wow, he's a bastard,
God damn, I'm pretty dark.
Oh, jeez, dude. But yeah, going back with those lenses is so much fun because I think you do stumble upon like, this is my reading of it for the next few years of my life.
If we can't find any around here, I'm afraid
it's funny to me we haven't talked in that explicit a way in terms of replays of games. Although I guess it's less common for us to be replaying a game at the same time as rewatching something like Breaking Bad.
Sometimes I'll tell you like, oh, I was playing this again and I kind of noticed this. Like we had that great discussion the other day about so I was playing through the FromSoft games and I'm reading Berserk and watching it, and like that has really affected me in a way that I didn't think it was going to. So sometimes it happens just naturally, but it's easier to throw Breaking Bad on and for sure laugh at how dumb Walt is.
That's always a good choice.
Rain, you said it yourself. You can't pass judgment until you know for sure, and you were right.
Did you know there's Kabbalah in Berserk too?
Oh yeah.
I didn't know that, but I was doing research for the Tales of the Abyss study that I'm finishing up, and
remember
stuff like the Qliphoth and
everything is Berserk.
That's right. And everything is Kabbalah.
Right. Yep.
I actually hear that the Kabbalah mystics base their interpretations of the Torah loosely on Berserk.
I'm just imagining the reading of the Torah, but you're not gonna get this, but the opening to Berserk is it's literally called "Put Your Grasses On." Like that's one of the lines.
Okay.
So it's tell me why, tell me why, tell me what you want. It's a really great song, but it's very like of its time in Japan. Yeah. And I'm just imagining a rabbi reading from the Torah. Tell me why. Tell me why. Nothing will go wrong. Put your glasses on.
He's right. We all came along because we agreed with you.
Philosophy tag, yes.
Not because we had to.
You can, but for point of reference, if you literally just showed up, the sense in which we were doing philosophy was making a running gag about Berserk and Torah interpretation in the Kabbalistic tradition. So
Kabbalah shows up in every JRPG.
I don't know if that's your jam or not, but yes, you can always ask a question.
Thank you.
All right then, let's get back to it.
Yeah, let's keep looking.
I've never been much of a quitter. Let's
So
scan
what's
this place
the-
from top to bottom.
What was the spirit in this place? Or is this a place?
No, this isn't one of the places. This is we're trying to find the rosemary to heal the light frog poison.
Oh, right.
The next one is the Centurion of Ice, which is by Flanor, but we need the boat to get there
I
based
see.
on the way the world is now. Yes, you can always shoot a question. But we are doing like philosophy of video games, so that's not to say your question won't be welcome, but just I'm the philosopher, this guy's a religious studies background, and we may or may not be equipped to answer your question. But if it's germane, we'll certainly talk about it.
Still got a lot to learn.
I guess once you think you're the best, that's when you stop improving.
What do you think, Dan? Is there such a thing as an objective reality?
Yeah, so let's get to it.
Good one. I think my flippant religious studies answer. So I'm going to steal your thunder for
Please.
philosophy.
No,
I'm
take
sure-
all the thunder.
I'm sure you have a pointed answer. My answer.
I have a
coming
gaming
from-
answer. I don't know if it's pointed. Yeah.
My answer coming from a religious studies perspective is, who cares?
Okay, show your work.
I think like whether we live in a reality that is defined by clear parameters or whether it's just perception that we're seeing everything through, or putting our own kind of view on everything and then deriving reality from it. To me, what matters is at the end of the day, like, all right, well, what are you doing in life? Like, how are you affecting people? How are you kind of changing the area around you as much as you can, for better or for good? I don't want to say it's a utilitarian perspective, because I don't believe in that. Like the idea.
No, that's super not utilitarian.
Okay, good.
No,
So
I would say utilitarianism is almost antithetical to that in terms of its like the spirit of it.
Okay, cool. So that would be what I say, where it's like philosophy and religion are so obviously linked, because a lot of the big thoughts kind of mesh with each other. But I think where they both meet kind of at the end of it, at least in a monkish perspective, is kind of like, all right, well, what's for dinner,
Yeah, right. I think for my part, I would say two things. One is general philosophy, and then the other is, since we're doing philosophy of video games, I'll try to tie it back to video games in a way that I think is philosophically warranted, but also fun. So I think in terms of like the general philosophical perspective, I align with Kant on a lot of things. And so Kant's general idea, very general idea in terms of like his metaphysics and the nature of the world relative to our place in it and how we can understand things, is he distinguished between what he called the noumenal world and the phenomenal world. We were talking about this the other day, because speaking about video games, I have this newfound hunch that Kant might be a good way of reading and thinking about Elden Ring, because if you recall, Marika, her race? It's her race, right? Yeah. She's one of the Numen, which I think is a potentially interesting and pointed reference to the noumenal worlds, which again is like a Kantian metaphysics thing. But so Kant was basically distinguishing between this idea of like, okay, using like human rationality and our capacity to perceive, we can infer that there is something out there objectively that we are like deriving sensory information from, but we have no guarantee that what we are actually experiencing corresponds to that directly in any particular way. So we can know logically that there is, to use your language, an objective reality, but we can't say anything about what the nature or character of that is. We can only describe our phenomenal reality, which is sort of the sum of our experiences and our capacity to reason and things such as that. So that's one. That's the philosophy one. But the other thing that I would say, and I'll type out this fella's name in case you want to look him up. He's a famous philosopher from my alma mater, a guy by the name of Rob Nozick, a famous 20th century philosopher. And he had this really interesting thought experiment that I think is... Well, hey, I'm trusting. I'm trusting you're a gamer. I think we've all had those violent bouts of solipsism. Look, I think it's interesting because solipsism can definitely be a dead end or something that causes a lot of anxiety, but I think it can also be sort of the source and motive for a lot of philosophical work. So I mean,
starting from zero, basically.
Yeah, like Descartes in his first Meditations, right? I mean,
I'm a big thinker, he says.
Listen, what if I'm the only thought? Yeah. How do I build a world out of that? Very cool. If you haven't read Descartes lately, I encourage you to do so, because that's something that's different and illuminating every time you read his Meditations on First Philosophy. But Nozick, he had this thought experiment of an experience machine where he was basically talking about, like the value of pleasure, and he's trying to build a foundation for his ethics and relationship with the world. I forget the name of the book that this is in, but one of the thought experiments that he led through as a kind of intuition pump was to say, look, imagine you could hook yourself up to a machine that gives you whatever experience you wanted for all time. Would you do that versus being in what you take to be the real world? And he kind of takes it as a given, as the intuition that we're going to have, that we would say no to that. Well, isn't that such an interesting intuition to have when so many of us are gamers and basically hook ourselves up to machines, not in a Matrix style, but in a way that allows us to engage with all of these virtual experiences? Because at least in the way that some people have read Nozick, the thought is, well, there's something that's just inherently valuable to having an experience that is real versus something that is virtual. And I think a lot of us I mean, I have this intuition.
Speaking
You
from
tell
a
me
place
if
of
you agree.
intuition.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like the experiences that I have relating to video games and the fictional worlds that they create for me, and even fictional worlds in other media, are deeply valuable and sometimes more valuable than experiences that I have in the real world. And so I think, like, at the very minimum, I think a lot of our engagement with the virtual in modern times has put a lot of pressure on that thought experiment, which kind of, to go back to your question, Newtonia 09, like that kind of leads me to a similar position to what Dan was saying in terms of like, not who cares, but almost like
in a fun Zen way.
Yeah, in a fun
not
Zen
in a nihilistic
right.
way.
Like,
yeah.
It's almost like it puts the burden on you to ask, like, okay, what is the content of my experiences and what do I derive value from? And if the value is purely in it being something that is like objective or materially real, like, why is that? I find it hard to give that content personally.
Getting deep in the chat.
I know. This is like the deepest chat we've had here since we've started streaming. So this is fun. Yeah, that's right. It's all on you.
Is there a point wherein your subscription to a phenomenal reality that actively harms you?
Okay, I'll take this one, and we should get back to the game because this is
I'm kind of
philosophy
interested.
of games. I know I'm interested too, but I think to take this one first, I would say, like, so one of my backgrounds in like academic philosophy is in not just ethics, but like the foundation of ethics, which is called meta-ethics, similar to metaphysics, right? Metaphysics is like, what is the basic stuff of the world beyond like just the physical and the science in terms of like what we can infer about the nature of how things are and why they're structured in the way they are. Meta-ethics is similar, but asking like, okay, what makes it the case, if anything, that an action is good or bad,
harmful.
Yeah, and what is it that creates these weird things called moral obligations for us, right? And so in meta-ethics, there's this pretty philosophically technical idea that's called, it goes by different names, but something like subjectivism, right? With the idea being like, wherever moral value comes from, and sometimes broader value judgments, like they have to be indexed to a set of beliefs of a particular subject. There's nothing that's objective out there in the world, untethered to humanity, that makes things objectively right or wrong. And that comes from, like I said, a lot of pretty technical stuff about like epistemology, the nature of thought, you know, what relates our beliefs to our actions, things like that. And so there are philosophical reasons to hold that kind of view in order to have like a rational basis for doing good and doing wrong. But I think there's like a much more commonplace understanding of like moral subjectivism that basically like throws out the rigorous basis for it and kind of the spirit of what that argument is, and says something more along the lines of like Assassin's Creed, nothing is true, everything is permitted.
Which, yeah.
And I think if you're talking about that as kind of like saying, oh, there's no objectivity out there, therefore like the only thing that matters is the way I see the world, that seems to me in the first place just like a really bad inference, but in the second place
Harmful,
something that can be really harmful to you and others. So I would say there's definitely a point where the rubber meets the road in terms of drawing bad outcomes from being too subjective or tied up with your particular experience of the world.
That's the thing that drives me crazy, the kind of like anti-realist perspective on things.
Yeah.
That drives me crazy because I'm not like a slave to morals, but I think if you're going to have morals, you should do the work of building the ethics beneath them.
Yeah.
So that you have a logically coherent system that doesn't just devolve into like emotional anarchy where you're doing whatever you want to people because it's you deem it to be good. That kind of, I do feel like what you're saying is not because of Assassin's Creed, but Assassin's Creed is a great example of it. Where
and a little because of Assassin's Creed. I mean, they didn't help.
Maybe they didn't help it.
If not Assassin's Creed, then Ubisoft as a company.
Yeah, we can definitely say that. Yves Guillemot especially. Yeah,
that's right.
But I think that that kind of thing drives me nuts. And so when I say like jokingly, "Who cares?" I'm not subscribing to that at all. What I'm subscribing more to is like the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy breakdown of philosophy, which is there's the evolution of humanity can be broken down into three questions. How do we eat? We need our basic needs.
Yep.
Why do we eat? We need to think about the there behind everything, the kind of philosophy of things.
Yep.
And then where do we get lunch? Which is the reality of it, which is like at the end of all of the pontificating, you kind of say like, all right. And that's the part where I come in, where I go, that was cool. I got to go eat now.
Right. No, I'm with you there. I think
it was a great conversation.
I know. And I'll put a button on this. Oh my goodness, we've opened up Pandora's box of philosophy in the chat, which I'm fine with. I
feel like it's your wheelhouse.
No, I mean, we can talk about this stuff all night, and I'll be happy with that. That's probably what we would do even if we weren't streaming. But we do have to get back to the game. But I will say on this also, especially for those who are interested in like the foundation of morality, one thing that
you're fine.
Sadly has not like. Oh, no, you're good. We're joking. This is all in good fun. And we're very grateful for being able to have this kind of conversation. But this has sadly not made it into the mainstream the way that like moral relativism or moral subjectivism have. Relativism, by the way, was the word I was grasping for earlier, and I couldn't find it. But people talk about subjectivism. It's basically the same thing for what we're talking about. But there's another project that's kind of smaller, but to me really interesting because it kind of toes the line and tries to strike the balance that Dan is talking about, I think, called moral expressivism, mostly championed, as I remember, by this guy by the name of Alan Gibbard, where he basically said, like, look, there's no kind of weird, spooky, metaphysical substance out there that makes it the case that something is morally right or wrong. That doesn't make sense. But it's also not true that morality is just this arbitrary thing that we can decide as like a single person or a group. And so he basically, why it's called expressivism is that he built up this whole like incredibly regimented semantics to say that like morality is basically this whole language of how we express things to each other. And there are rules for being able to speak that language and engage with society according to that basis, such that basically by having this kind of just like interactions with each other, we get all of the kind of like moral force binding our actions that we would want to get out of a more like objective out there moral reality. And I think there's something that like really resonates with me with that approach, where it's like, no, of course it's not the case. We're not going to discover like a kind of quirk out there in fundamental physics that like makes us have like certain actions be morally right and some be morally wrong, right? But it also seems wrong to say that like there's no such thing as morality, or it's just something that's conditioned by society. That feels wrong to me, at least. Like it feels as if morality is like pointing towards something that is important about the structure of human action, and so figuring out how to adjudicate those two considerations I think is really interesting.
I wonder, and the evolutionary psychology question is a good one, because I feel like evolution in general, like you were very careful there to dance around my field, which is there like there's some mythic thing out there, right, that's determining morality,
right.
But I think that people will often say like there's no basis for like the gut feeling that people get. Like if somebody says, I feel that this is wrong, right? Then I would argue that there is something inherent within all of us that kind of bends that way. And I would argue that it's probably, whether through religiosity or not, an evolutionary trait that we have that basically says, these are the things that seem to work out for us when we all believe in them. And so I don't like when people say like people just decided on morality, because that's not it. There was something that was driving them towards the kind of unified justice that people want. And I think that that's something that, you know, I don't think comes from some external force that just exists in the ether somewhere. I think it comes from us, and we keep what's the word with a sword when you're a blacksmith? We keep tempering
Forging?
it. we keep tempering it over time to kind of get to an ideal that we can never reach.
What's that thing when you're a blacksmith?
What's that thing when you're a blacksmith? Swords?
The eternal sword! Oh, yeah, it's funny because like there are some meta-ethicists who talk about like evolutionary theories of ethics in terms of like, yeah, there's nothing out there, but it's basically just the convenience of the social contract.
Seems like these people with a social contract continued to live and eat.
But I feel like it's like people oftentimes say, okay, you know, it's either going to be science or religion, or going to explain it in terms of like evolution or in terms of these, you know, metaphysically foundational ideas. I don't think it needs to be as clear cut in either or. Like even, you know, I consider myself, broadly speaking, a Kantian in terms of my ethics. And when it comes down to the way that Kant is thinking about like what it is that obligates us to do things and to owe things to others, it's basically just like a critical look at the structure of human action and rational thought and saying like, okay, what does it take to actually have a logical principle behind your actions, what you call a maxim, or what Kant calls a maxim. You might call it that, but that was his technical word for it, with the idea being, okay, really when we think about what it is to act rationally, that actually requires us to act only in certain ways. And when we extend to the consequences of that, it basically starts to look a lot like morality and these sort of ethical commitments that we have to ourselves, to each other, to the world. And so in one lens, of course, Kant is building that out of, you know, his own like metaphysics and idea of what rationality consists in. But on the other hand, like if you think that the mind developed because of evolution and had, you know, these frameworks according to which it was able to like reason and make predictions about the world and act in certain ways that allowed it to propagate itself, like I don't see a requirement to choose between one or the other of those. If anything, one is an analysis that helps us to like better understand the output of the other.
Its antidotal effects may
Big
be weak
think.
in this state.
Biggest thing.
Big think we
Oh my
done
goodness.
did here. Great questions.
Yes, thank
you for the conversation.
I was prepared to think that deep about this game, but not about those particular issues. So
Well, I mean, but when we think about,
It must be the lack of sunlight around here.
I
that
feel like
keeps
we
all
were
the
just
plants
talking
from
about
thriving.
this. No, it's not a JRPG. Well, it kind of is.
okay.
Yakuza Like a Dragon. Like I told you that I had this really deep, I would say, spiritual experience in it, where at the end of it, that is a game full of different philosophies and people, like people who are older and have been through a lot, who are trying to rationalize the world. And the philosophy that wins out in the end is, and this is why it spoke to me in the Zen sense, it's just compassion and love, where it's like the through line between all of these like rationalizations or vying for power or whatever it is, you know, the even if the universe doesn't bend towards justice and love, like you have more respect for people who act that way. So I think like there's games that kind of take the idea of it would be fun to do like a study on certain games that we love, where it's like games that are building their ethics as they go to reach their morality at the end. And I feel like you could easily come up with a game that's like that.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Well, and for reference, Newtonia, if you're interested in philosophy, like as seen through the lens of games, we've done a lot of that working with theterriblefate.com, and some of the stuff that I do with my philosophy background is like looking at Leibniz's metaphysics in terms of how it relates to like Xenoblade Chronicles and Plato's metaphysics and kind of just broader worldview and Xenoblade Chronicles 2 and things like that. So I think there's a lot of connective tissue there. But yeah, I think like it's so interesting in a game, especially where like not only can a game be building its ethos and its view of morality as it goes along, but it's kind of forcing you to make decisions that create that morality as you go, right? One idea that I think is really interesting and kind of cries out for further study in the wake of video games is the philosopher David Hume, so another really old school guy. He had this idea of what's called imaginative resistance, where the thought was basically like, okay, we talk about imagination like it's this great and free-flowing thing, like we can see things that don't exist in the real world and entertain whatever we want. But he thought like when it comes down to it, there are certain things that we have a really hard time imagining. And one place that he focused on was the idea of like imagining worlds with a different ethical reality than our own, right? With the idea being, especially if you look at a fictional world, you know, it can tell you about fantastical things like dragons and, you know, different sci-fi elements, and it can be really easy for us to buy into all of that. Obviously, if you're a fan of, you know, Tales of Symphonia or Star Wars or anything in between, Lord of the Rings, but if it tries to show you a reality where like it's good that a character is murdering, like it's going to be really hard for us to buy into that. And in fact, a way that you can kind of clock this for yourself as you're going through some of your favorite games or stories is like oftentimes if a story tries to tell you that like something morally reprehensible was right, you say like, oh, well, you know, maybe we have an unreliable narrator, or maybe like
the context is so specific.
Yeah, or the author of the story is being heinous, and so we sort of blame the author for the moral ambiguity or incorrectness of the world. Insert your favorite example here, right? So like we kind of bend over backwards not to imagine the reality of that, right? And so all that to say, I think especially a game with its interactive story and opportunity to kind of demand that its audience help it to build out an entire reality in the game, right? That can actually be a really good way, even like Nozick did with his thought experiment of the experience machine, to sort of test our intuitions about like, okay, what do we really think about morality when push comes to shove, and how can we explore that in a way that like, you know, through this simulation, we're prompted to make decisions, but decisions with different and safer stakes than in the real world, so we can kind of try out and test our impulses in a way that we wouldn't be able to just say walking down the street in our actual town.
Thinking of just so many great Star Trek episodes that are like, what if it is that experiment where it's like, what if this society grew out of like a an ethics system that is completely reprehensible to us,
right?
And it works for them, right? Like that's the really scary thing. It's like, and it's what your question there, Newtonian, made me think of, where it's like this kind of, it's like when we were evolutionarily designed to be afraid of spiders because they look so different to us.
Yeah.
The idea of like an idea that's so foreign to us coming to us and being like, no, absolutely not. You know?
Right. Yeah.
It just comes from somewhere.
No, you're right. I have to imagine, knowing the amount about logicians that I'm embarrassed to know, that some have done this kind of evolutionary research into where that impulse has come from. But like, even think about it from the armchair, and you can imagine why, like you're asking and thinking about, it would be an evolutionary impulse, right? Because like in general, you know, nature and the world around us tends to be predictable according with patterns, right? Not that, you know, to say nothing about whether the world is literally deterministic or stochastic or whatever, but set that to the side. The fact of the matter seems to be like people are able to make predictions. They're able to see some regularity in the world. We're able to do things like build cities and procreate and survive, right? Which is pretty great. So on the whole, you might imagine that like, yeah, being able to build a consistent worldview that allows us to then, you know, draw inferences and do things like figure out the connection between, you know, like striking a piece of flint against a stone and making fire, like, yeah, that would be conducive to helping us to survive. Whereas, you know, endorsing systems that, you know, even pre-theoretically lead to contradictions, like those contradictions, especially in like a pre-modern world, would probably lead to your death in one way or another. I could see that.
It's making me think of trying to think of a good game that like presents an ethical system like an episode of Star Trek, and you have to kind of go with it. And I guess kind of like, we always talk about Spec Ops, but that's kind of one of them, where it's like just militarism till the day you die kind of thing.
But even Spec Ops is like, well, I guess you could kind of put it that way, because it's like,
it's not as readily apparent. Like I'm thinking
it makes you buy into that system without realizing it, only to say
thing.
like, and you feel awful.
That's the thing, is that you think it is your normal morality system, right?
And then you realize it's not.
Whereas, like, I'm thinking of, there's a great episode of Star Trek: The Next Generation where there's a race of people who euthanize people when they turn 60, and it's just like, it's just accepted because
isn't that the plot of The Giver too?
I think so. I don't think
it's part of it.
I think it's like a bunch of people were euthanized and then they just left.
Oh,
I think that's
okay.
But I think you're right.
Yeah. Euthanasia is definitely part of it.
Yeah, and it's, you know, obviously our Star Trek crew is like, well, this is reprehensible. Like the person in question is this person who, he's turning 60, but he's a brilliant scientist who's done so much for the people. And so obviously, like, the crew, in particular, like Deanna Troi, I think, is like, well, he could do so much more. Why not? What's the logic in killing somebody in the prime of their life when they could do all? He's worth so much more alive. And then the whole argument that's antithetical to that race is like, but that's how we live and survive. If we don't do that, then we run out of, people don't have a chance to flourish themselves. Like the next scientist wouldn't come around. That's not fair. And like there's this weird injustice system that's placed on them since birth that to them is just like, that of course that makes sense. Whereas of course all of the humans and the human-ish people are like, that is so evil to us. We can't imagine why you would do that.
This isn't quite the same thing, but going back to our earlier example, like Dishonored is kind of like this too, where almost like it forces you to think about different aspects of your own, like, if not your own morality system, then just like the different tacks you take when engaging with something like a game, because it has these different like choice paths and seemingly ethical systems of like, doing things that seem better or worse in the world. But that's also all couched in the context of this otherworldly god, the outsider, just giving your avatar these powers and literally saying like, I'm just interested in a good story and I want you to do whatever seems fun, right? So it's like
the genesis of the world is amoral.
Yeah. Or like the only moral virtue is like doing something interesting, right? Where that can be something totally morally reprehensible.
I think that it, going back to intuition, feels evil to us.
Right. Yeah. But like feels evil in a way that like we're sufficiently entertained that we're like morbidly willing to enact it, right? Yeah. Or maybe the curiosity as much as anything. Yeah. For sure. Yeah, I think. Sorry, Newtonia, I'm just reading your new comment. That's kind of what I was driving at in terms of the like why favoring logical consistency would evolve. Again, I am much less of an evolutionary biologist than I am a philosopher, so take it with a grain of salt. But it seems feasible to me. Yeah, and then of course we develop and overdevelop these rational capacities, and we sort of fold back on ourselves, especially when it comes to philosophy of science, of despite having gotten this far by evolution, being sufficiently equipped because of evolution to ask these more probative and foundational questions of like, but are there really laws of nature? And like, how consistent is the world, and how much can we count on that in terms of like logical certainty?
I think there's an idea in, the foundation of Zen is that so obviously the foundation is Buddhism, which is that there is suffering in the world, which clouds our view of reality. But Zen specifically finds itself saying there is sort of like, there is a noumenal place, right? There is a truth that we are experiencing that gets clouded by our perception. So we're not really seeing the truth. But the funny thing about Zen is that they then go the step further into the daily life practice, which is, and that's fine, by saying like, if you're aware of that, that's about as much as you can do, right? So the idea of enlightenment as Zen would be that you are experiencing everything as it comes to you in the moment without any kind of preconceptions or clouding of judgment or anything like that, which I think would be a nice way to live, but because it would hopefully nullify suffering to you in a way that you would still experience it, but it wouldn't be like crippling like suffering is meant to be.
Well, it's acceptance, right?
Right.
Whether we're talking philosophically or biologically or just in terms of like psychological wellness, I think so much of it comes down to the idea of just like the embrace of the overall nature of things. All the stuff I've been doing with the study of Kabbalah for this article on Tales of the Abyss, very much the same way, right? But like to sort of preview what I'm thinking about in this article, hopefully be publishing soon. Like there are different branches and sects within Kabbalah, which is itself like a subsect of Jewish mysticism, right? But the one that I'm thinking about and that I think has sort of the predominance in Tales of the Abyss is this one that was sort of put forth and developed by a guy by the name of Isaac Luria, with the whole idea being basically that like in order to create the world, God had to like exile himself basically, and so the formation of the world also came part and parcel with the fracturing of the divine presence, so that it became incumbent upon people who had the free will and the ability to engage with immorality to actually like find those divine sparks and repair the universe by acting ethically, such that like their individual actions actually comports with like cosmic rectification.
That speaks to my favorite view of Pascal's triangle problem of God. He can either be he can be two of three things: all-knowing, all-powerful, and all-good.
Right.
And it's a hard thing for religious scholars to think about, because obviously the questions of why do bad things happen to good people come up. You know, it would make sense that he's all-powerful and all-knowing, but maybe he's not all good.
Yeah.
Or maybe he's all-powerful and all-good, but he doesn't know what's going to happen, so he can't prevent it. So Norm Macdonald, philosopher of philosophers, said my favorite thing in the world, which is the idea that, similar to that kind of exiling oneself from the world to then leave the sparks of divinity to be found by people to put it back together.
Yeah.
This idea that God, or this presence, can only create negativity or evil in the world, but through a cool twist, good comes from it, right? And that's how it justifies itself.
Yeah.
That it's not just like perpetuating this awfulness throughout the universe, but it's actually kind of sowing the seeds so that nice things come out of it. So I think that
good can only be born from evil.
Right, to kind of combat it from within itself, and that goes back to Zen and the whole idea of the Ouroboros of morality. But I think that
the theosophical flywheel.
Yes, exactly. So I think that that's where I'm more comfortable thinking about things, is like, how do you get to the justification of why certain things happen and kind of comfort yourself with it, right?
Yeah.
Because I feel like that's where religious philosophy picks up, where just logical philosophy kind of says, all right, this is what we're thinking.
Right. Admit I kind of lost the thread of what we're supposed to do next.
Did we get the antidote?
No, it said that it's dying because there's no sunlight, so I was going back through trying to figure out how to get sunlight on it. Oh, are you kidding? Thank you.
That was
that
was a nice one.
And seriously, I mean, whether or not you're interested in the substance of philosophy of video games, if you ever simply want to talk philosophy, feel free to, do the old sub thing and come by and hit us up anytime. It's usually just me, this fine gentleman, my oldest friend, and another analyst in With the Terrible Fate is visiting, but we both love talking about this stuff.
And Aaron made a good point. We'd be talking about it if we weren't streaming, probably.
It's very true, yes. This is in many ways the heart of our relationship and friendship.
But yeah, thank you. Awesome conversation.
Yeah, come back. He'll be here Friday too, so it's a good opportunity for this further philosophical
disambiguation of how happy we are.
Something like that. The disambiguation of how happy we are.
My life in so few
That should
words.
be the stream title on Friday.
Yeah.
Oh my god.
Oh, thank you very much.
There you go. They're good glasses.
I wasn't fishing, but I like what I caught.
Maybe that's a hint that I need to get glasses too. I thought the philosopher's beard would do the job.
Probably.
Did we not talk? Yeah, I'm at the probably stage because
no, we haven't talked about it.
I can still see. I'm just like, I'm becoming aware that sometimes vision takes effort, which is something that was never the case for me. Don't tell me that.
Yep. I mean, I feel like
I had been feeling comfortable in avoiding it. Do you? Because I'll tell you, one time a couple of years ago at Thanksgiving, I put on a buddy's glasses as a joke, and everyone was like stunned at how good they thought I looked in glasses. So,
no, I think for me
speaking of not fishing for compliments,
I think the contact. I feel like you would get a lot out of the ritual of it.
What is that supposed to mean?
Of like,
piercing my eye,
piercing your eye, making sure they're clean, putting them away.
Oh my god!
I feel like
I don't know how to take that, Dan.
Sometimes you'll get a new hobby, and I love like checking in with you on the hobby a couple months later because it's like,
that's
and
true.
now I have all of the accoutrement.
Right.
So yeah.
So
You
yeah,
should, but you should get
I'm
them
learning
if
a
you're-
little bit
if you're
about
struggling.
Ireland. Yeah, well, you know, turns out they have this interesting, rich history. You know, I'm watching Braveheart, and oh yeah, I'm working a little bit on the art of crafting my own kilts now. And I hate how much this sounds like me. I really hate it. You have my number.
Yep, it is. It's the
Jesus.
but it's you said this the other day. It's like the gamer in us looking for the accessories on everything. It's like I have to.
You
I
need
have
the
to-
equipment.
I have to min max my hobby
It's the gamer and the Batman in us. We need a
Yes.
utility belt for it.
for every occasion.
Jesus.
These guys are tough.
Yeah, I feel like they're gradually climbing in difficulty even in the same dungeon. I changed the sorcerer's ring function to light, so I'm hoping we can just light it up with the ring. Yeah, we'll see. Yeah, I'm trying to remember the last time I did that. So I feel like as I am maturing, I've gotten like a little bit better about not just taking on a new thing, because that's too simplistic. Who would ever do that? But nesting the new thing within old thing. Like, oh, you know, I got a feeling like maybe I can understand Xenoblade Chronicles 3 better
coffee.
through Wittgenstein. So, well, through coffee too. Fine. All right. So, yeah, I learned everything about Ludwig Wittgenstein and coffee in order to study and be sufficiently caffeinated for that. Oh, thank you. That's so nice of you to notice the caliber of our friendship. Well, we are very truly like modern day grown up best friends, I would say. And yeah, it's a pretty good story. We met in high school, so well over a decade ago at this point, right?
Yeah.
We were both super into theater and all of this kind of, you know, general humanities nexus that we've been talking about on this stream. And so we had the opportunity to like act with each other and cast each other in each other's plays, and kind of one of those situations where the more we got to know each other, the more we realized we were just very deeply simpatico.
Yeah, it's funny because we always it's a blur, but I feel like even when we were casting each other in each other's plays, it was like a foregone conclusion that we would both be in them, even though we weren't that close at that time.
Oh yeah,
yeah, and then it was just from there. Yeah, so that would have been
2011, 2012.
Yeah, so over 10 years now.
Definitely,
Yep.
yeah. But yeah, because I remember at first I was just like, well, at first I literally just like, I saw you because we were acting in Macbeth together,
yeah.
and I was like, that guy looks hilarious and very cool, but I don't know him, so I'll probably just have to admire him from afar.
Likewise, it was really fun because we recount this story all the time, the two of us, but I don't think we've ever told it on like a podcast or anything. But Aaron's role in Macbeth required that he get stabbed to death, and
then come back as a ghost.
Yeah,
I was Banquo.
And there was this lunatic guy who was there who taught us like what the realistic result of being stabbed is. So he goes into like, so me and another of my friends were standing to the side, and Aaron is like maybe like 5 feet in front of us, and this guy is just like, the thing about getting stabbed is that when the knife goes into your flesh, it cauterizes around the knife. So
it sucks your skin in. I remember he told me.
The pain isn't in the stabbing; it's in the ripping out. And so I remember that was like the first time I was aware of you, and I was like, this guy is in the funniest situation I've ever seen in my life.
And I was like, okay, all right. Clearly that was memorable enough that we both remember the guy's exact words to this day.
Yeah.
But I think maybe because I could even see us like looking at each other and clocking each other's similar reaction to that.
I think we did because you were fair play to you. You were like humoring him and treating him seriously, but you definitely looked at Tomas and I and were like.
But I had a sense of like, okay, these guys get it. Yeah. So it was like after that, and honestly, you know, without naming names or dishing too much, we were in an interesting environment where like not all of the theater people at our school were, let's say, interested in theater for the same reasons, and so we were both very involved in like the student-run productions and stuff. And so, yes, it was very much a case of like, okay, this guy gets what I'm about and the kind of theater I want to do. So I'll just like, even before I know the dude that well, I'll just scheme and collaborate with him. And then really the linchpin, I think for me at least, that jettisoned our friendship into like the modern era, among many other like mundane, more adolescent things, was the fact that this guy has the cojones on him to his senior year of high school undertake this whole independent study, basically looking at video games as literature, exactly like we're doing now, arguing that games like The Legend of Zelda, Ocarina of Time ought to be treated as art and considered as seriously as any of your favorite books that English teachers made you read because of their structure and because of what you can draw from them. And remember, this was back in 2012.
It's 2012. So the predominant feeling of it was the Roger Ebert quote that video games could never be art.
Yeah.
So that was, it's much more obviously accepted now, but
thankfully,
at that
and
point,
in large part because of efforts of people like you, I would say. And I've
to
seen
old people who didn't think that way.
I've seen the culture kind of grow up around him. But so he did that independent project, and the culmination of it was a public presentation on it. And at that point, through theater and friend groups, we were fast friends. So of course I was going to go to that. And I remember just being on the cusp of starting to think about philosophy, and I was studying interesting things about like the intersection of psychology and religion and ethics, and really a lot of stuff that we've come full circle on back in this this stream, this audiovisual experience that you're having with us. And so I sit down and he's talking about like the hero's journey and the literary theorist and cultural theorist Joseph Campbell and how that can be applied to the Ocarina of Time. And I just I'd grown up with video games but never thought about them in that way. And it was so inspiring to me that this dude would do that I basically totally stole his idea and did the same thing the next year for my senior project.
But for the sequel, and in a way that was much more in-depth than mine was.
My project was not more in depth, but what I did was basically borrowing from our theater tradition, say like, okay, I want to do like compare and contrast studies basically between
role playing.
Role playing and famous plays like Macbeth, that was actually one of them, and video games that have similar role playing mechanics. So the one I did opposite Macbeth was Dishonored, actually, in keeping with this stream, for it to come up yet again. But yeah, so that was the moment I think when I realized like, okay, we don't just speak the same language in terms of theater, like we have similar DNA in terms of like story and how that impacts us with gaming and stuff like that. And so we've just been bugging the hell out of each other ever since, I guess.
Always been around games and talks like this, that's for sure.
Games, talks like this, still kind of one of my cornerstone now mythological references that I'll tell people in terms of like just the beauty of getting to know someone over a game and what it meant to like share and trade games back in the day when everything was more of like physical discs than it is now, and do a lot of couch co-op and stuff like that. I remember many times back in high school we would like go to our local burrito joint for a lunch and just talk about the games we were playing, or go to our favorite in the world pizzeria, a place called Supreme's Pizza. Actually, I should probably say their actual name on this stream so that if you ever end up in Exeter, New Hampshire and want to look them up, it's easy to find them, so they get the free advertising. Supreme Pizza and Seafood, is
Supreme
that
Pizza
it?
And Seafood,
I couldn't remember if there was a house in there, but which has the best buffalo chicken calzones in the world. And so we'd often get one of those over a dinner and just bring it back to one of our places and game. Many of my favorite games were, Dan lending me one of his physical copies of something and vice versa. So lots of bonding over just gaming and shared experiences. Oh, we're sort of boomeranging back to the theory side of it. I at least would say, Dan, I think I know your answer.
Yeah, you probably
But I mean, this is one of the things that so for your reference, the stream that we're doing now is part of With a Terrible Fate, which you can find on withaterriblefate.com, and which is basically like the publication for the literary study of video games that was built up around my work in the philosophy of video games. And so it's something that I think about a lot in terms of like, well, does picking apart and analyzing games and annotating it with narrative and symbolic themes, as you say, does that sort of like take away from it? Does that critical distance make it harder for you to truly love it? I would say for me and for basically everyone I've talked to about this stuff, it's exactly the opposite. I think you can almost think of it, and I like to talk about it this way nowadays, as a meta game that you can play with it, where it just adds another layer of meaning to the game. And so now when I sit down and play a game and think about these levels of symbolism, it's not like I'm doing homework or I'm taken out of the game. It's more of like, I notice connections and have different kinds of experiences with the game than I wouldn't have otherwise. And so it's like kind of like I get 3 games for the price of 1 every time I sit down and think about them through these lenses. And it gives you more to talk about with other people who've played them. It gives you like a sort of base language for saying like, well, you noticed this stuff in your playthrough. I noticed this other stuff. If we have this like lingua franca in terms of the storytelling of the game and how it imparts themes, we can better adjudicate the differences in our experiences and come to understand like, you know, not just my time with the game, but also Dan's time and what he took from it, and sort of get to the heart of like the capital M meaning of the game at the end of the day.
And that's something too that often evolves out of just conversations that we have of like our gut reactions to things where we'll like, I remember, so Aaron played Crisis Core Final Fantasy VII for the first time relatively recently, and I remember I deliberately said like, turn your theory brain off. What are your emotional reactions to it?
Right.
Like, I want to hear about that so we can talk about that. And I think that sometimes we'll play a game and we'll have that reaction, and then we'll just be like, yeah, it's pretty good, and then we don't talk about it ever again.
Right.
You know?
No, and I think it's good to have those different lenses, and that's why I call it a metagame as opposed to like the one true right way to play a game. Because I don't think that's right, and I think that can be kind of like destructive and like you call out in the chat, a kind of group bias, right? But I think when you just think about it as like one language and one way to talk about it, then you can still like Dan says, turn your theory brain off, think about your emotions, and then if you want later, like use those emotional responses as something to theorize about. But I'll tell you, I mean, like we go out to gaming conventions all the time, talk about like, you know, reading various specific games like through the lens of literary studies. We did that with the Final Fantasy VII series last year, like the whole series from the original all the way through the remake. And many times we're really fortunate to find fans who just like really love the games, never thought about it through that lens before, and they find, like I said, like it sort of opens up a whole other game to them. Like it's a new way to play their favorite game, and oftentimes they'll tell us like, you made me want to go back and New Game Plus this game and like re-experience it just to think about it through this lens. Like we were talking about earlier actually, in terms of like watching a familiar show like Breaking Bad but reading it in a new way, right? And so like maybe group bias in the sense of like people who love video games, but beyond that I don't think it's like a self-selecting bias or anything like that.
I'm with you, Pizzicato. That's why I think when I play through a game, I like actively decide at a certain point that like, okay, I'm gonna do something on this, because sometimes I'll play through it and I'll be like, that's really interesting, but the only thing I want to say about it is how cool that is. Yeah. And then other times I'll be like, okay, I want to take notes so I can talk about this on a podcast or something.
Yeah, Pizzicato, if you weren't here for this, over 600 hours, my last playthrough of the Xenoblade Chronicles series, just to be ready for thinking about 3 in this way. So yeah, I mean the time adds up, and oh my god, just like the exhaustion of this thumb for pressing the screenshot button on the Switch on like every goddamn cutscene, like hundreds and hundreds of screenshots to sift through. So there are cases when like taken to the extreme, like yes, if you're actually trying to like publish literary theory on these games, then it boomerangs back around to being homework. But like there's a happy medium.
Deliberately homework.
Yeah. If you choose to do that, then of course you can. But also you can choose to like, you know, min-max the crap out of your character in a game like Dark Souls or your party in Pokemon and spend 3 times as much, you know, time as you otherwise would on it. And
which is where I live comfortably.
Yeah, which is where you comfortably live, and that becomes a chore sometimes too. But it can be good work. Newtonia wants to know if we're religious, Dan.
Not really.
Yeah, I hate that it's become a cliche and like an unenlightened white person thing to say that you're spiritual but not religious, because like I don't even know if I would describe myself that way were it not a cliche. But I wasn't raised in any organized religion, and I think through my interest and experience in philosophy, I've gotten really interested in sort of like the philosophical side of religion. And so, you know, there are tons of intersections between religion and philosophy over millennia, and many schools of religion are sort of more philosophically oriented in terms of the ways in which they like schematize the spiritual. And so that really resonates with me, and I find that interesting. And I find religion like a really intellectually interesting topic, as I know you do, Dan, but I wouldn't personally identify myself as a religious individual.
Yeah, I'm basically there, but on the sort of religious scholarly side of things, where I mean, I'm obviously interested in it because I studied it forever, and I still look into, like, I'm still very big into Zen, and I think that it's one of those questions where, like, Newtoni, if you came back in like 10 years, I might have a different answer for you. So it's one of those where it's like I don't feel that way now, but I know a lot about it and I think about it all the time. That I could see, like, you know, I was also raised Catholic, so I did have that background.
You know, it's
not practicing now,
and
but
it's funny that you call that out because I can almost tie it back into video games here, because we think about like different playthroughs and the way that like these worlds and their ethics evolve, like we were talking about earlier, right? And I feel like sometimes you can sort of see different playthroughs or moments in your own playthrough of life in different moments in the real world.
Yeah.
And what I mean by that is, in particular, thinking about my dad, right? My dad, he retired like I think 5-6 years ago at this point. I know, it's nuts to think about, right? Because I feel like he just did. But he was never really like a religious guy. He was raised religious, but he sort of outgrew it, as a lot of people do. And since he retired, he kind of has been getting, like, in a very deep and not cliched sense, spiritual, by which I mean he was always really into hiking, and he kind of took it upon himself to start doing a lot of big pilgrimage walks. So if you've heard of the Camino de Santiago, and if you haven't, I encourage you to look it up. It's like the most famous and one of the oldest like pilgrimage walks in the world. It goes through like Spain and France and that area of Europe, and it's over 1,000 miles. And so he did that just because he had heard about it from some friends of his and listened to, you know, some background on it, and kind of fell down the rabbit hole of this as like an interesting retirement experience to do. And he kind of got hooked. Like, he did this hike, like a similar pilgrimage called the Via Francigena last year, which goes actually all the way from Canterbury in England down to Rome, but he started in like northern Italy and only did like 500 miles or something ridiculous, and terminated in, like, you know, the old capital of the Holy Roman Empire, right? One of the most religiously significant places in the world. And literally, like, the last stop on the pilgrimage is Vatican City. And I was able to, like, fly out with him to Rome, and he, like, properly walked into the sacristy of the Vatican to get, like, a stamp authenticating his pilgrimage on this spiritual journey. And that's kind of like you're saying, when you don't know what your future holds, like, it's corresponded with things that I never would have expected of my dad and don't really expect of myself, but that maybe, you know, with time and the right lived experience and right playthrough, I feel I might get around to. Like, he's also a vegetarian now, because he kind of just, like, as he was going through all of this other journeying, kind of just like awoke to the plight of animals and just suddenly felt as if, like, you know, he really could no longer live with himself for eating animals and sort of implicitly subjecting them to that misery and way of life. So I think oftentimes, like, the spiritual and religious dimension of the world has a way of sneaking up on you. Like, you can't decide that, right? It's kind of like
some people do.
Life breeds it into you. Well, yeah, some people do.
But
but
I think
for people such as us.
Yeah. And I think, you know, I line up with your dad in that sense too, because all of my, like, trips to Japan have been pilgrimages that I've created.
Yeah, right.
So I think that, and not for religious purposes, but for just like historical purposes. Mm-hmm. So sometimes it creeps in and you kind of find yourself thinking like, oh, I wonder, you know. But yeah, I think it comes down to, this is why I love studying religion, because I grew up in a time when people kind of turn their noses up at it. And now we're in this weird time where there's a resurgence of radicalism in a lot of different areas.
Yeah.
And I think that casting it aside or fully embracing it are both problematic avenues. So I think, like, learning, I mean, it's part of human culture. Like, it just is.
Yep.
It's kind of difficult to argue against. So that's why I say, like, I don't know. Who knows what'll happen, but as
part
of
of
now,
human culture and such a cultural lexicon, right?
Yes.
I mean, I think for both of us, it kind of ties in as much as anything into the just semiotics and hermeneutics of understanding, like, not just literature, but sort of world culture, right?
And selfishly, I like it, and I know this is why you love philosophy too. It bolsters my enjoyment of the things I already like video games and anime.
Yep. 100%.
So, like, when I play Neo and Neo 2, I can see all of the Japanese folklore and religious kind of tinges that are in it, and I get more enjoyment out of it. So
Yeah.
yeah, I bet he
Absolutely.
was. I mean, you were there. You probably.
Yeah. No, it was truly nuts. And I think that was the thing that was sort of humbling about it, right? Because like even for my dad not being an especially religious guy, right? Like you after walking hundreds of miles through like rural places and just living out of a pack and based on the hospitality of people who opened their doors for him literally, and he had so many stories about his time there, like to walk into just this extravagant in every sense of the word place. That's not quite the right word though. Resplendent. The resplendent place that is the Vatican, right? And to have like truly a place of honor there, right? Like it's such a, sadly, a tourist trap too, right? And so my dad as a pilgrim was like literally able to walk past like all the lines of people waiting to get in and like ushered to the sacristy to be able to be like recognized.
Pretty huge.
Yeah. As like, yeah, I think
it's hard to then file that
right.
away, I would think, from your dad's perspective as like silly religion,
Yeah, no, completely the opposite.
Yeah.
It's like, even if you're not like strictly religious, like I think you do something like that and you feel called to make a special kind of meaning out of it and to honor it, right? Like his next thing after he like came back from that trip was, oh my God, I need to figure out the story that I want to tell about this, because he had so many people back here who were kind of like following his trip from afar, and he would send them email updates, and he like spent months literally laboring over like this slideshow presentation of like the story he wanted to tell. You can picture my dad doing this.
And you
right?
are your
He knows
father's
my
son
dad.
also.
And yes, I mean, Dan also knows because he's experienced more times than either of us would care to admit me pulling my hair out before like a presentation at a video game convention. So, but yeah, which ties it all together, right? I think so much of it has to do not just with like the fictional stories we engage with, but we care about them because we care about the story that we're telling in the real world, right? Whether that's ethics or the religious experience or just explaining the value to us and to the people we care about of the things that we do, right?
I think the last thing I'll say on the topic too is that, I found myself diving into video games and other stories to find something after I lost a family member. And I think that it was really like a case of why people look to religion, where they're like, I need to make meaning of this or find some sort of comfort. And then the real comfort that I take out of it is that I've now come into a place in my life where doing that reading of games, like we were talking about, kind of, if not gives direct comfort to people by like me talking about it, gives me another common lexicon by which I can relate to people.
Yeah.
So like if I'm talking to somebody and we've both played Ocarina of Time, I know exactly how to talk to that person.
Yeah.
And I find that that's very valuable, even in like my work life, is just finding that kind of connection. I think video games kind of gave me that. So yeah, I don't know. It's something that I wish people didn't just write off and kind of, similar to the questions that you've been pointedly asking, Newtonia, about, the philosophy of mind. And, it's something that it's not just a vacant exercise. Like it is something that's worth doing. So especially if you keep finding yourself coming back to it. So.
And you can tell how much, like, especially in this age of pop culture, so many people, thank you, Newtonia. Like, I think so many people are so in love with these pop culture artifacts, whether that's video games or anime or even like physical objects like pop Funko figures, or pick your favorite
Movies,
thing, right?
whatever.
Anything. And yet I think there's not the kind of shame attached to it that there was 10 or 15 years ago, but I think there is something that still feels kind of fringe about it, right? We're like, well, this is my hobby and this is what I care about. But then these are these other like serious things that I do and what I'll wheel out for like conversation topics if I'm meeting someone new or something like that, right? Which is like, I hope we continue to move away from that and more towards just like bringing this into the mainstream, because that's the ironic thing about it, right? It's popular culture, it's the most mainstream stuff, and yet there's still, I think, kind of a discomfort with taking it seriously and really digging into it in this way. And I'll tell you, like, one of the things that really stood out to me, especially at this last lecture I gave at PAX East, was, I was talking about Xenoblade Chronicles, which amazingly has, you know, grown to pretty popular acclaim, with the third one being like a landmark release on the Switch. But before that, and I think even now, it's still like, it's relatively niche, where like the people who know it really damn well, and otherwise maybe you've heard of it in passing, but it's not the kind of
It's not
footprint
Final
that
Fantasy,
it's not Final Fantasy, exactly. And wow, I was amazed at how many people showed up. Like, there were hundreds of people who came to this talk, and then so many of them hung out afterwards, not just to ask me follow-up questions, which often happens, but just to talk with each other and to meet people from the audience and to have these conversations that I could tell they were all so hungry to have in their day-to-day life, but they didn't feel like, you know, in so many cases, like with a game like that, you won't have people in your immediate circle, sometimes not even in your immediate online circle, where you feel like they know this game inside and out the way that you do. And so you can just talk about why it means so much to the both of you and use it as a common language, right? And so I think the more we can create those opportunities to really get to know others who love these games and these cultural artifacts in the way that we do, it becomes, I don't want to say a religious experience because that's kind of trite and unfair, but it becomes like a really meaningful and resonant experience by which you can get to know someone else and better get to know yourself through this like network of relationships with a common cultural artifact.
And I might say it, and to synthesize what you just said and what Newtonia just put in the chat, I'll just quote my boy and say, "To ponder the mystery is in itself a gift."
Yes. Yep. I think that's a good button on it.
Yeah. What should we do?
I think we're fighting a big frog. It's easy. I'm a big frog, he says.
We made it big. Ribbit. No, that's a mushroom.
Oh, it's a mushroom.
You have frogs on the brain because of the light frogs.
Yeah. Maybe we would fight the light frog. Oh, shoot. My controller turned off while we were having stimulating intellectual conversation.
We put our controller to sleep. Oh, no. Well, look, and to try to beat this boss while also keeping half an eye on the chat, I think, you know, with any like large cultural experience like a religion, there'll be really thoughtful figures who capture something that is like deeply essential to the human experience, and they'll also be good marketers, right? I mean, there are good marketers.
Con men and
well,
snake oil salesmen.
You get a little bit of all of them, right? But I think you're right, and I think the great thing is that like there are so many lenses into different aspects of the human experience. Like, even my last comment on it notwithstanding, I think there is something like the mystical or religious experience that you can get just from like really having like a flow state in Dark Souls, or like but really, right, like when we resonate with our favorite stories, I think there are like different transcendent registers that we can access in terms of like how we're thinking about the world and relating ourselves. Like, that's a big part of this study of Tales of the Abyss that I'm going to be publishing soon, is, you know, not just thinking about it as something that references Kabbalah, but something that we can actually think about as sort of a meditative act, and something that like encourages us to, by playing the game, engage with ourselves spiritually, right? So I think like all that to say, don't lose hope in, you know, being able to find that register of experience in your life. And if you feel like organized religion isn't the thing that does it for you, it doesn't have to be. There are so many different ways to get to those different levels of just consciousness and understanding of the world.
Without falling into that moral anti-realist trap we were talking about earlier.
Yes, that's right. Toe the line.
Yeah. This guy.
This fucking guy. That face.
Please don't.
I feel like we had that face on for most of this day before the stream. Thank you, Newtonia. You have a great day too, and best of luck to you.
Thanks for stopping by.
Really hope you stop by again. We're at the same time, 7 p.m. Eastern onward on Friday. So the chat has been as edifying, if not more so, than the game this particular time. So to say nothing bad about the game, but it's been a great conversation.
We gotta find a frog.
No, we got to get the antidote for the frog.
I want to find the frog, though.
Why?
I want to find him.
I'm sure we'll find the
frog. They don't. Chekhov's frog rules say that I want to see this frog.
Ribbit.
Oh, it looks like the rosemary's all better now. Great job, Emil.
Indeed, this is just what we need.
Excellent.
Not to be confused with Rosemary's Baby, which is not what we need.
No. Decidedly. Rough turn of events.
Resident Evil wants to know your location.
Is that supposed to be a compliment?
Oh, it is.
Hey,
it is for the infamous light frog.
It is for the infamous light frog. Excuse me, that's not its name. Tenebrae beat that into us, but I already forgot its actual name.
It's Kampai.
It's Neviosa? Wingardium Neviosa? There was an N in there somewhere.
It's just Edelweiss. That's what it is.
Edelweiss. Nesdrovia. That's what it is. Nesdrovia.
I love
close.
I love the
Closer than I
phrase
would be.
"we talking frog" because yes, and
we talking frog.
Oh, we talking frog. A lot of times in my life.
No, I'm afraid that won't do. I am a teacher after all. I'll see to your
A frog falls into my favorite category of animals, which is the animal that I imagine said at one point, "What the hell is happening to me right now?"
Like you were talking about with
caterpillars
the other day.
Why am I goo?
Jesus Christ, I did not plan this. Speaking of things that evolution gave them, but they can't rationally reflect on like we can. Not today. You are fascinating.
By mushrooms. Beautiful.
Wyvern coming in clutch.
And our big punchy boy.
Smidge? Okay.
I like Smidge better.
I'm glad you offered that because my impulse was Smeggy, but that sounded just suspiciously wrong. So I felt better to say nothing. Smidge it is. Welcome back, Smidge. Good to have you. You didn't miss much gameplay. We were having a very rewarding and absolutely surprised conversation about philosophy, religion, and what I think a little bit of everything besides.
Yeah. It was a good combo.
And the value of video games, of course. The glue that holds it all together.
So as I'm sure you know, because it sounds like you know quite a lot, we just got the antidote, and now we're going back to the sick guy, right?
Sick guy.
To prove that Regal didn't burn somebody, right?
Yes, to prove that Regal is not the arsonist.
Yeah,
that's definitely true. Yes. To say nothing of the intertextual relationships with Final Fantasy X, as Dan keeps bringing up, and the way that this sequel kind of
feels like
mirrors it in certain ways, which I still have yet to play, but it is all the more on my list now.
It's a good one.
Once I get through all the Tales games, then I'll go to Final Fantasy.
Are you doing it in any particular order, or are you just going like
super not? I started with Tales of Symphonia for all the reasons we talked about in terms of it being personally meaningful to me, and the remaster, and just a good touchstone for sort of the themes that I wanted to talk about in the broader series. And then I felt like it would be unfair to do that and then not follow up with the sequel. But yeah, I mean, I'm thinking as much as people are still interested, it would be fun to definitely keep going with it as the broader Tales of Praxis series, but I don't have strong views about what we do next. Yeah, I mean, I've been talking a lot about Tales of the Abyss because I played it a couple months ago, and if I haven't mentioned it to you before, Smidge, I literally just now this week am finishing at least the first draft of an article that I've been working on, like an elongated study of it. So it's been really interesting to kind of see the two games in relief with each other. The first Symphonia and Abyss, I mean, because they are very similar, and I think similar in quality too, where I just, as a kid, I remember it was kind of a toss-up for me whether one of those was my favorite, and then after I played Graces, because I loved Graces, whether that was my favorite. But I think, especially now having thought a lot about Tales of the Abyss and replayed Symphonia, I think I would say something similar to what I say about Majora's Mask versus Twilight Princess when it comes to The Legend of Zelda, where, like, I think the most emotionally moving and resonant to me, at least as far as my memories go now, would be Tales of Symphonia. It just got hard-coded into me as a kid, and so I think it's about that as much as anything else. Whereas in terms of like my favorite, and I think the one that's like the highest quality and most memorable to me right now, I would say Tales of the Abyss, but I say that with hesitation because there are others that have meant a lot to me. I really loved Grace's. I think Arise was really thoughtful and cool, and I've been looking forward to replaying that. I only played it once when it first came out, though I played the crap out of it at the time, as you did. Yeah. So, yeah, all that to say, I'm excited to revisit them all as much as anything else. Yeah, Luke is a great part of that, but I think, like, the closer you look at it, I think this is the case with all the Tales games, at least the well-put-together ones. Like, no matter which character first grips you, like, the closer you look, the more their character development is, like, tied in with the broader world and the other character development. So it's one that really rewards, like, sort of taking your first point of interest and, like, interrogating how that expands to the story in general. You still need to beat Arise? Yo, Smidge, you have to get on that. Because, like, without giving spoilers, because I'm trying not to spoil other Tales games on the streams, but I love that game so much, and especially, like, it's one where the ending of the game totally recontextualized the rest of the game for me, but not in a way that was disappointing. Quite to the contrary, in a way where, like, I was uplifted.
And it's solid all the way through.
Yeah, it's solid all the way through, but I think the ending really ties it together in a way that is just, like, very thoughtful and touching, and also in a way that is, like, unusual for your typical Tales game. So it has a lot to recommend itself.
Right.
A big frog hit me or something. I'm assuming it's big. It might not be big.
I know. Why do you go with that?
I want it to be a big frog.
Yeah.
It's like if it were a regular sized frog, it wouldn't even be worth talking about. So it's got to be giant.
It's either got to be really tiny or really big. These are my rules.
100 little frogs or one big frog?
I would take
it's the perennial question.
Frogs.
Yeah, any day.
I feel like I could take them. I get a bunch of them stepping on them, I think, probably.
Depends on how small.
That's right, yeah.
So we were hoping you'd help Regal.
That's a boomerang too, though, because you think about ants. Like, it can be kind of hard to step on ants if you're really trying to, because they're so small and they have that body armor and stuff.
But hopefully a frog wouldn't have the
yeah, they're slimy, so they kind of squish instead.
Squishy, yeah.
Or they're so small and they squish so much that they just kind of slide out from underneath your foot. And it boomerangs again.
Mm. See, at that point, I would probably feel comfortable that stepping on them stuck them to the ground enough that I could get away. Okay. So that's probably where I go with it. I'm not fighting a big frog. No, I'm not doing it. I'm not doing it.
It would just eat you, man.
Yeah,
it would eat you.
I don't want it. I would figure out the 100 little frogs.
Whatever it takes.
Yeah. I'm not getting away from the big frog.
Strange frog that gave off an intense heat and bright flashes. It ate up all my seafood gel.
Also, and I don't know why I feel compelled to bring this up, the frog was enormous.
It was surrounded by this white light.
For everyone's edification.
Yes, it's exactly like that, Smidge. That's what we're riffing on.
We did that. We did that yesterday, Smidge. I don't think you were in yet, but yeah. So we've got a through line of which animals would you fight.
I guess of all the recurring bits, that's not the worst one in the world.
It gives us a good chart of capability for us to
deal with 100 tiny Martas obsessively doting on you, or one giant Marta who refuses to let you go.
Oh, that's a genuinely terrifying thought.
Oh no.
You need a full recovery.
Yeah.
Smidge gets it.
Well, let's go see Regal.
Good idea.
Yes, it is. Give me the 100 duck-sized horses and the one horse-sized duck over there.
Riding each other.
Oh god. You're stacking the 100 horses on top of the duck?
I was thinking the big duck was using the 100 horses as like a nanomachine wave.
Oh, okay, sure. Nano body armor just surround the entire carapace of the duck. Yeah. We build some fanciful monstrosities here on the stream. Jesus Christ. She is pretty awful in the beginning. But look, I as I think you know at this point, I'm feeling generous on this playthrough of it. I feel like there are more decent than I remember story reasons that she comes on so strong immediately. So
I mean, from what you were telling me, she had a pretty rough go of it.
She had a pretty rough go of it, and Emil was like as literally as it gets without literally being the case, her knight in shining armor in her hour of need. So I can see how, especially like in the adolescent psychology that she has because she's a kid, like you would attach to that and you see that person again, and of course you don't want to let them go. Yes, we're coming around on her for sure.
I owe you a great debt. Thank you.
I'm sorry that I ever doubted you. Let me take off those handcuffs. Wait, huh?
Our hair.
I can't find the key. Maybe I dropped it somewhere.
It's so fucking funny.
Graduated top of your class at guard school, huh?
What's that supposed to mean?
They're engineering an excuse.
Hopefully I won't get arrested a second time for destruction of property. The manufacturer of these handcuffs isn't exactly known for their quality craftsmanship.
I know, because I engineered the most unbreakable handcuffs that I wore in the last game for my sins.
Perhaps you should try the Lazareno group model next time. I'll send you a free sample.
Yes, sir.
I'm sorry, but I would like to change my clothes. Would you mind if I went ahead to the inn?
Regal might be my favorite.
Good idea.
Pretty cool.
I never thought I'd see you in a prison uniform again.
I'm truly ashamed. I must thank you all again for what you've done. I really do appreciate it.
I think you're right, Smidge. I think this is a different VA. It's interesting, though, like, Lloyd's is obviously different. I think maybe just because Scott Menville is such a recognizable VA, and so it's obvious. But I feel like with a lot of these, they did, like, just such a good job with casting a replacement that, you know, if you really know, you know. But I'm having more trouble than I would care to, in some cases, telling whether it's the original or a replacement, which makes me feel it's probably a replacement if I have to wonder. Yeah, I think you're right. Coletta's, though, I definitely clocked her being the same VA. I think you're right. And that's what I was saying on a previous stream. Like, I feel like if they had recast everyone, that would have been one thing, or if everyone came back, but with it's that makes it harder to buy into the continuity.
Because you could almost make an us type argument if everybody was recast, where you could say this is a different view of these people, you know, which would be interesting, and that's been done in other shows and stuff before.
Right.
But mixing and matching is just kind of like, well, you didn't have everybody.
Yeah. And you can't really, no, there's no way to interpret that within the world, not really.
Not doing a lot of bending over.
Too much. Oh, this isn't the inn. The inn is the one near the front. Yeah. I'm kind of two minds about that, because I get what you mean, but I don't... Like, I'm trying to figure out whether it's worth it to be generous to the game in that sense. So Dan, for your background, one of the things that we've been talking about is that, like, a lot of what happened in the first game is remembered, but not as much of it as you might expect. And so there are weird holes where, like, you know, characters like Emil and Marta, they understand some things about the world regeneration, but, like, some of it is misunderstanding, and some of it is just, like, clear holes in their knowledge that we can call out because we were players of the first game.
Right.
And similarly, like, they bring back some NPCs. Like, there's this woman, Lila, in this town who, like, had a whole little small NPC arc in the first game, and now she's, like, here, but she's not really talking about that, which can make it feel like they're sort of overlooking it, but it's weird because they're bringing those characters in anyway. So, like, I get the weirdness of that Smidge is talking about, but I also feel like there's something about that, contrary to the having some voice actors back but some not back, where, like, that almost does feel believable within the world to me, where, like, you know, we're visiting these characters another time, and maybe they wouldn't bring up something from 2 years ago because they're just kind of continuing on and living their lives, right? And maybe other people in the world wouldn't have a perfect understanding of what happened to reunify the world.
I think it's more forgivable when it's a different character, like a different main character, but I'm thinking of the Shenmue series and how in Shenmue 3 there's like clear references to his family and these awful things that happened in his past, and he'll ask questions about it because it's like, oh, it's probably like 15 years since you played the last Shenmue game, so
Right.
we need the main character who was tragically traumatized by all of this.
That could be harder to buy into on a narrative
Yeah,
level.
it's like, it's the guy who killed your dad, you loser. What are you talking about?
Come on.
But I do get that sense of dissonance, because it is like, especially when something is so important to you in the first one, or like there's so much time spent on it, it does feel weird when it's like, oh, you're just not even like a reference, not even like a mention of it.
Right.
It was like your whole thing 2 years ago, or whatever it is.
Trying to figure out what I'm missing here. Regal said he was going ahead to the inn, right? And this is the inn, so I'm not crazy, right? Smidge, you who knows this game inside and out, do you know where I'm supposed to go next? This is embarrassing.
Did he say the inn?
Yeah, and I checked the synopsis just to make sure that okay, try leaving town. It's a good idea. Yeah, because the synopsis, which is, I'd forgotten this, the synopsis is written as Marta's journal, which is interesting. But she said that Regal had said he was going to go ahead to the inn to change his clothes. And she quietly mentioned that she thought he looks sexy in his prison uniform, but was very guilty because she loves a meal. The kind of stuff you only get from the journal.
Well.
Let's try that. What the heck? Okay, we're clearly missing something.
Was he going? Oh, maybe he just went. Oh, Smidge said, "Did you sleep?"
Yeah, we slept. We did that.
What if he's just at the bows, right? Because he was changing. Maybe he's just ready.
No one here. Taking the prison again. Okay.
And then he just went back there after he changed.
Now I need to be released in proper clothing. The most diligent guard in the world. Oh, so? Oh, of course we had to talk to Berg again. I guess so. We're kind of out of other options.
Please.
So Regal and I were talking, and suddenly this bright ball of light appeared in front of us.
And that was from the light frog?
Yeah, a lit up frog. It was really bright, and Regal passed out almost as soon as he saw it. I was wearing sunglasses, so I was okay at first.
It started giving off light.
I'm a cool guy.
That's a bit odd.
Frog.
The frog!
I'm telling you the truth. Then it started.
I should have known after all our talking about it. The solution to advance the plot is to talk frog.
Yes, we gotta talk frog. We talking frog.
Talking frog.
Maybe I could put it out somehow, so I swung at it with my hand. But then I felt really weak.
You must have touched its poison when you hit the light frog.
So you can get poisoned just by
That's
touching it?
some frog.
Man, that's some frog.
Heard a spider wrote that in her web once.
Some frog. Okay, he's gone now.
Okay. Maybe now Regal is at the end.
It's called the light frog.
Right.
Can't win for losing.
Just messing with him.
Light frog.
This might win for funniest skit.
It's pretty good
so
with
far.
the build-up, yeah.
Not just the Nozdrovier.
Fine. I see how it is. I get it.
Tenebrae.
Yeah, that was a great one. Hey, there he is. Fancy boy Regal.
Oh, wow. You're really fancied
Love
up.
it. He's a noble.
Yeah, his name is Regal.
That's right. It's literally in the name.
For a moment. Thank you for helping me. I never imagined we would run into each other again in this manner. Did you come here looking for Lloyd?
Wait, you know where Lloyd
He
went?
just doesn't look quite right with both of his hands on opposite sides of his body as opposed to bound in front.
And just who are you?
Yes. Things have gotten rather complicated. Why don't we give you the basic rundown? Tenebrae, come out, will you?
It's Tenebrae.
Oh, Christ! Oh! No, Regal's rich. Rich people know about all of this stuff.
That's right. All these
First
pacts.
Azosk, then the Centurion's cores. Just like with the summon spirits and the angels, we seem to be bound by fate to things of this nature.
So, what about Lloyd?
From what I heard from Berg, Lloyd is headed for Flanor. Apparently it was very recent.
Rain.
So maybe he does know?
Able to catch up with him after all.
If I may
Probably
be
took him a
so
while,
bold,
though.
I too am concerned about Lloyd. Would it be too much to ask that I accompany you on your journey?
I'm sure Rain and I wouldn't mind.
What about Marta and Emil?
I'm fine with that.
We probably won't be of much help, but if you're okay with that, what about you, Tenebrae?
I will follow whatever course you and Lady
I'm
Marta
game.
choose.
Thank you. On the name
Let's
of
do
my
it.
eternal beloved,
Oh yeah,
I
cool,
swear
man.
that I shall not betray you.
Well then, shall we depart?
Really got yourself with that one, huh?
Oh yeah, cool, man. The best reaction to
Where'd it
anything.
come
It's
from?
it's a sketch from Antidana where it's just a reaction of to absolute lunacy, just going, "Oh yeah, cool, man."
That is a good one.
What is it, Emil?
Also from our new favorite show,
Okay.
Shrinking. Okay.
No, it's nothing.
Okay.
Oh, I can be a different person.
I'm sorry I didn't tell you.
Son of a bitch.
Smidge! Damn you, Smidge. I was trolling my best friend. How dare you? No, I know you can. You're right.
I mean, it is good to have the healing, but
yeah. No, you should pick who you want to play as. We'll rotate
I would
someone
like
in.
to. I would like to try out Regal. He seems cool.
Let's do it.
Is he still kicking in this game, or does he use his arm?
I don't know that I ever used him in combat, so we can
Oh
find
yeah,
out.
let's try.
It's interesting just for that. Rotate out our ogre buddy.
Yeah, because we want to keep her leveled up,
Yeah.
since she'll be with us the whole time, right?
Right. Semi-auto.
Cool.
Yeah, these still all look like his feat-based combat. At least they have the same names. Do you want to allocate
yeah.
them?
All right.
Since they hilariously don't give the second player the ability to use the game's main menu outside of battle.
Do all those.
Fabulous.
Cool. He's like a featured player now, right? Because that's
Yeah.
So he's just
He's a very
jumping
special
in.
guest.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, he does have amazing combat flow in the first game. It's great. They're all just kicks, but actually, for all I said, I don't know if you were here, but I've said in the previous streams. No, because we were talking about it with the Rise. Like, there's great aerial combat in the later
Yeah.
games in the series, but that really wasn't the case in the first game. But Regal could pull off some pretty great foot-based combos in the air. All the more amazing for them being with his feet.
And we never expected to find you behind bars again.
I know, seriously. I thought for sure you'd be busy issuing orders from Lazareno HQ.
In addition to my duties as president, I'm also working as chairman on the board of a startup company. We're hoping
Oh no,
to
acid
business
flashbacks.
mainly in Silverot. I was traveling around to get a feel for the market.
Oh, that's right. Even though it's a Tetha Ala-based company, Lazareno is popular with Silveranti.
The efforts they invested into rebuilding Palma
For people on the stream who
Many Tetha Alans
are curious, I have another life running and working in startups.
change that way if they
Which, and that's all I'm gonna say about that.
Thanks to the conflict with Tetha Ala, half-elves aren't persecuted as much as they
I'm much happier in my Philosopher of Games hat. Let's just leave it at that.
The overall situation is unfortunate, but perhaps it can also be an opportunity.
Looks like we both have a few problems that must be dealt with.
But our problem right now is Lloyd.
Yes. I wonder what he's up to right now.
having a grand old time of it.
Living it up. Having hearts to hearts with himself in Flanor.
It's me.
How do you really feel about me?
Me.
Me too.
I like me.
Me love Lloyd.
Me. My wife likes me.
Now boarding for
My
Flanor.
wife.
What's the matter? You look worried. The boat's about to leave.
It's kind of weird.
Honestly, though, he's doing better. No, you're not doing better than I would have expected. I expected you to do well just by osmosis through the other JRPGs and anime that you've gotten. But I do think, I mean, seeing it through your eyes and also just playing it and seeing the way that they turned the first game into Mythos, I do think it's one of those cases similar to some other franchises we've been talking about where, like, it would be possible to play this one first and then go back to the first one, and I'd be super interested in talking with someone who has that perspective, because I am sure they would think about the overall story very differently than the way that, you know, you and I do, Smidge.
Well, you see...
You're a man. Speak up.
Ha, remember that old jab? It's back.
Grow up.
I'm still worried about the fire. The light frog could appear again while we're out looking for Lloyd. That would mean the fires won't stop.
Yes, that's certainly true.
You should definitely play Fantasia. I haven't played the first Final Fantasy, but triangulating my experience with Fantasia with Dan's experience of Final Fantasy, I would say it strikes me as very similar to that, where, and you tell me if this resonates, it's like, it's sort of, now looking back on it, sort of like the prototypical one for the series, where like, it's much simpler, it feels more like mythology, because like, much more of its story is told in gestures with a lot of like, you know, less of the nuanced lore than you get in the more modern ones. So it's almost like a fairy tale relative to the more recent ones, and you see where the more recent ones sort of got a lot of their seeds for their various ideas from. So it's nice as a long-time fan of the series to go back to those earlier retro ones.
Though the light frog shouldn't produce enough heat
Is
to
it?
start
Is it?
fires, except under extraordinary circumstances.
You're punching above my weight class in terms of the lore of how the games are related to each other, and it's been a long time since I've played Fantasia, but
That's cool.
So do you mean then that like Symphonia was meant as a prequel to Fantasia since it was like released after that?
But the fires in town have been going on for a while, so these extraordinary circumstances must be happening.
Perhaps it's another side effect of a dormant Centurion's core. As its vulgar human name would suggest, the light frog is a light elemental monster, and the core of Centurion of Light is...
Yeah, I mean, I get the world tree in Fantasia is Yggdrasil, right? So I get that. But I mean, I can understand how that would be a point of continuity between the worlds. I feel like for it to be a sequel, there needs to be more than, you know, the common ground of a world tree, especially when that's a world tree that is rooted, no pun intended, in like broader world mythology as opposed to the mythos of the games. But like I said, I mean, I haven't played the game in a long time, so maybe there are those other connections there besides the tree, and I just don't remember them. Yeah, so kind of just like in a very different age, but sort of spiritually in the same world.
Oh, yeah, I guess so. It's kind of like what we were talking about earlier, like
Lloyd has Lumen's core.
Yeah, like where so much time has passed that it's an effectively different game.
It's like, yeah, the mythology of the mythology has become the mythology.
Yeah, that's funny, Smidge. We were actually, without knowing it, talking about this exact situation earlier in the stream, and we were talking about different like sequels and ways that games can be related to each other, because we were saying, like, you know, sometimes you might imagine a game where like many ages have passed since another game that you played, and it's kind of taking place in the same world. And what I said at the time, which is exactly how I'm feeling about the relationship we're talking about between Fantasia and Symphonia, is like, when that much time has passed, unless you have like a really clearly articulated story to tie it to the other age, I feel like it's almost like so much time has passed that we are in a different story, even if it's in technically the same world, because we have kind of the same relationship, if anything, that like, you know, Symphonia had all the way back to like the age of the Karlan War and Mythos back in the day. you know. Oh, you're thinking of are you thinking of Suzu? The I know there's a ninja, I think an optional playable character in Fantasia, if I remember right. I remember liking her. I forgot her last name was Fujibayashi though.
Then we must hurry and go after Lloyd.
But I'm worried about what'll happen if we just leave the town without doing anything.
I wish they did optional playable characters more. I love that just like little sort of Easter egg feeling of something that adds to the story in a good JRPG.
I won't spoil it because Smidge hasn't finished Arise yet, but there were a lot of fun things that I didn't fully understand at the end of Arise that were optional, if you remember correctly.
Oh, we're gonna have to talk about this off stream because I don't remember.
There's a very
So you're saying that you'd like to look for a way
I
to
guess is it
control the
fair
light
to say like
flux
a
incendiary tentacles?
into the Spider-Verse kind of situation?
Yes, you're talking about like the post-game dungeon. Yeah. Actually, yes, and that came up in Tales of Symphonia because that's where a lot of that comes from.
Really?
Yeah, so if you go back and play that.
Oh, that's right. You told me at the time. Okay,
Yep,
yeah, because the final fight, you said yes. I remember now. Okay.
Yep.
Yeah, I like
We got
that.
there.
Yeah, I like that
Without
stuff, even though I
spoiling
didn't
anything.
understand it.
Yes. And that's the right kind of thing where like I think the right kind of thing where it ties the game together and like motivates you to maybe like go and
It's like a
understand the
teaser.
deeper lore of the
Yeah.
other one. Yeah, like a connection, but also not something that like you need to grasp in order to understand the content of the story.
It fit with
right?
what was his name? A something. The main character. It fit with like his and
Iron Mask. Because his name
Iron
is
Mask.
spoiler.
Yeah. Oh, that's true, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, Iron Mask and his companion. It fit with their story too. Oh yeah, you were telling me about the book.
The book, in Symphonia, is that what you're talking about?
Yeah.
Yes. So I didn't get all the way through because from just my streamed playthrough, I was too underleveled to make it through the whole dungeon. But yeah, we were talking about it to catch Dan up on Niflheim and the Demon Lords and everything like that. It was just as nuts as I remembered. What a book! The book! We were talking frog, now we're talking book.
It's fun.
The quotes plus all caps is the only way you can describe that. Yeah.
Time.
Much like the Scholar of the First Sin DLC in Dark Souls 2.
I'm loving every minute of it.
Fun!
This is very fun. I like having fun. I've been told it's great. I enjoy having it.
I would pay money to have this much fun in a game. Give me more of this, please.
How about this? Rain, you and Genus can go on ahead to Flanor and find out what you can about Lloyd. We'll stay here and try to settle this whole Light Frog conundrum.
All right.
It's so weird seeing...
You had me at Light Frog.
And then you really reeled me in with conundrum.
Yeah. Ooh, the spice of life.
Watching him gesture with his hands, though, after an entire game where he was handcuffed is like, I feel like an alien learning how to use arms.
The ship bound for Flanor is departing. All aboard!
Emil, Marta, see you soon. You too, Tenebrae. Take care of yourselves.
I do hope you'll call me Tenebrae the next time we meet.
Definitely not.
Rain, thank you. See you later, Genus.
I'm Rain. I might spank you.
Good luck, guys. See ya.
I'm nuts.
Oh, before I forget, I wanted to give this to you, Regal.
It's a book of poems.
What is it?
I guess you could say it's a love letter.
Rain? Wow, she's so bold. I better learn from her example.
Read it later when you're alone. Don't show it to anyone else.
I'll know if you do.
I never thought I'd receive such a gift from someone as beautiful as you. I will protect it with my life.
I don't think it's a love letter.
This can't be happening. What if Regal becomes my brother-in-law?
So first off, shall we check out all the places in town where fire had broken out?
Smidge, I'll tell you this because I know I've told you in the past that I played Tales of Symphonia many times as a kid and beat Abyssion many times, and so I'm not ashamed to say that, underleveled as I was from the streamed playthrough, I attempted Abyssion no fewer than 4 times. This is the super boss in Symphonia, and I figured it was better to call it a day and take my L as opposed to grinding through to get better equipment and higher levels. But yeah, if you go back and watch the VODs, which are on With the Terrible Fates YouTube channel, you will see me being deliciously frustrated by our favorite Super Saiyan Demon Hunter turned demon.
I'll accept that.
Thank you. I appreciate the acceptance. I accept your acceptance.
Yes.
Regal, you seem so...
I killed Nebulum for the first time on my Tales of the Abyss playthrough. Didn't even have to run that back once. So, not that I'm bragging, but I'm trying to make myself feel better as much as anyone.
You would do well to follow his example, Emil.
How's that been going for you? Mania is like the I want to hurt myself difficulty. We have the sadist in this game, and we have the masochist in our chat.
I know.
Yeah. Yeah, good luck with that. I'm sure once I go back to just grind through everything in Symphonia on my own time, I will be right there with you.
Was it really about, you know...
I hardly think it would be at all proper to reveal its contents. Rain, like all women, is entitled to keep her secrets private.
Private secrets? Like a confession of her love for you?
I'll leave that to your imagination.
Oh my gosh, no, I have to read it.
It's better than sex. You're supposed to be investigating the fires, right?
Yeah, he
just
said go and look at all of them.
But Dan, it looks like everything is on fire. Or was on fire, I guess.
Find all the fires. He was very clear.
He was. That's smoking. There we go. Times 10 experience is always a good perk to get. It's too good. It always made me feel too powerful back in the day, to be honest. Just one-shot everyone immediately.
I love that, though.
Yeah.
That's my favorite thing about RPGs in general.
I remember as a kid, I don't know if this is technically possible. I'm sure someone actually tried to answer this question, but just doing New Game Plus over New Game Plus and building up experience in Tales of Symphonia, my dream, like little kid JRPG dream, right, was like get strong enough to one-shot the final boss.
Yeah, yeah.
And of course, you know, not going to do that, but it was nice to have that goal. Alright, that was one fire. So one in the end. No. Okay. Don't think that... Oh!
Oh, she did mention him.
She did shout out Ifried. Oh no, but I went through the dialogue too quickly. She said something about her dear Ifried. Okay, so there you go, Smidge.
One line that you can't get back.
Yes, one line that we can't get back, but there was a shout out to Ifried. So the game has some memory of what happened in the first one. And here we were talking such shit. Okay, so the frog is into seafood gels.
He's so hungry.
I can relate.
Give me these.
In the words of my favorite character from Majora's Mask, I will consume.
I will consume everything.
Consume everything. Was it Evil Mask or me on a generic Friday night? We'll never know.
It seems like that would be... Oh, wait. Wasn't there one by the boat?
Yeah. It must be.
That's the first one we saw.
Is this one? No. Is this one? Maybe the other fella? Yes. Yep. See, this town is just big enough that for this kind of quest, this is the type of thing where I sort of wish there were markers for like whom to talk to or where to go in town. I feel like that would be just a little bit of quality of life that wouldn't take away from the feeling of exploration that much.
Or even, or even the like the thing that a lot of modern open world games do, where it's like just this area, there's something here, you know?
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, just like a yellow highlighted portion
Yep.
of the map or something. Yes. Yeah, it's weird because I feel like, you know, to your point, Smidge, like there aren't that many steps to take in any one of these quests, but I feel like there's been more than one point, even on these streams with Dan, where we've been like, all right, so what is it that we have to do next? Like, it's not as intuitive as one would think. Yeah. This is how everyone talks about liberty, right?
Big squiggly line, that's what happens to me.
Lazareno, Lazareno, Lazareno. Yeah, Max, who was crushing on Lila, who was obsessed with Ifrid back in the first game, also remembers Lila. Yeah, so there's some memory of the little things in Izoold. Okay, well, be honest, I was kind of hoping that was the last guy we had to talk to. Well, I guess we haven't gone in here yet.
Oh, there's something.
There's a kid too. Yeah, I noticed that. No, he's still sucking at hide and seek with his daughter.
You can talk to Berg again.
Dr. Berg, okay. Oh, there we go. No, it was just a kid.
My big beautiful fish.
No,
Who was a
my
man.
fishies.
It appears we've seen all the fire sites now.
And then some.
However, none of the locations are places you'd expect to find a light frog.
There must be some common thread tying them together.
Gels.
They're all in Izoold. Oh no, it's seafood gels.
More specific than
Fire
that?
sites have in common. Seafood gels.
They were all scorched.
We looked at all of them.
They were all things that we looked
Are
at.
we the arsonist? Are we the light frog?
And that's how Regal ended up back in prison,
Wait a
but with Emil and Marta this time.
I'm the light frog.
Oh god. They made a pact with the light frog instead of Ratatosk.
Now see here,
Fuck.
I am a centurion. I am an expert on monster behavior.
I guess you're right, but
Mostly monster nomenclature so far.
Quit it, Tenebrae. You're only the Centurion of Darkness. What the hell would you know about a light elemental monster like the Light Frog?
Jesus Christ. I'm gonna beat the piss out of you for mischaracterizing yourself.
Stop yelling at me.
Quiet! It's time to put our theory to the test. Let's go.
Yeah, you would think that Regal would get that one before Emil would.
go where?
To get some seafood gels from Berg. We'll use them to lure the Light Frog out of hiding.
So this is the Ratatosk mode that Rain was talking about. Suppose I should see how things play out.
I like Ratatosk mode too, Smidge. I like it as much as anything for the music. Like, give me more of these crazy guitar riffs as if from nowhere. Yeah, I think that love letter was about Ratatosk mode. Give me all the seafood gels you have. Is this not where we're supposed to get the seafood gels? Yeah, you were saying that the like his power stance in battle. It's nuts. He looks
And just
feral.
as the change of it's like Clark Kent and Superman, where it's like Clark Kent, you'd never know because he's all shruggy and he's like, meh,
Right.
like Emil is. And then all of a sudden Superman comes out. It's like, that's not the same guy.
No.
That can't be. I know Clark Kent. He sucks.
What a difference posture makes. Emil, Superman.
Yeah, that makes sense.
What? You think seafood gels attract the light frog? Don't be stupid.
Oh no, he called Ratatosk mode and you're stupid.
You know. We'll never know if we don't try. So just hand over the damn
I'll
gels.
beat you to a pulp and wrap you up in a gel, man.
Jeez, what happened to you? It's like you're a completely different person.
Our apologies. I'm afraid he's a bit on edge today.
Well, I wouldn't mind giving you some, only all of my seafood gels burned up in the fire.
Then please make some more for us.
Sure, if you'll bring me the ingredients.
What do you need?
I'm
Seafood and gel.
to catch some more.
Yeah, even Bird gets it right away, right, Smidge? This NPC. Jeez, it's like you're a whole other person.
But I won't be heading there anytime soon. After everything that's happened, I need a few days rest.
So, what do you want to do?
Nothing.
Go and get some jellyfish, of course.
I want a nap.
Well then, you better take some of this with you. It's the only bait the jellyfish really respond to.
Alright.
Regal, can I ask you something?
Sure, what's on your mind?
I want to know what makes men tick. Guys are always rejecting me, saying I'm annoying or too serious or whatever.
Any man
I don't believe
who
that
says
anyone
something's
in
not
her
worthy
life
of
has
your
called
time.
Marta too serious.
Yeah, right.
Young lady.
Sometimes they call me like too cool and sexy, and it's just really frustrating because like I feel like I'm pretty good looking, but
It's just hard being so conventionally attractive.
I have so much to offer, and yet it's almost like it's not my fault. I'm great.
Regal, do you think that I'm holding myself back with these incredibly hot and attractive flowers that I put in my hair?
Be honest.
I can take it.
Regal, can I beg you a question?
And that was the last we ever saw of Marta. We're going back to the caves, right? Is that where they said?
Is that where the jellyfish are?
No, Tria.
Tria.
Much further back. At least we get to go on a nice, non-interactive walk. All the way across the map.
Oh, to the fishing hole. Okay. Like where we got the big turtle guy.
Are we going fishing again? Reusing the same minigame?
If you can believe it. In a Tails game. There's a
Man,
bunch
I
of
can.
fishing happening.
Okay, that's not a Tales thing. That's a JRPG
That is a
thing. We
JRPG
talked about
thing,
this.
Oh,
Even freaking Twilight Princess. That's just a Japan thing.
It's been a while.
Do you fish?
no.
Yes, every now and then I take the yacht out for marlin fishing.
Wow, it must be great being the president of Lazareno.
Marta, do you prefer rich guys like Regal?
What do you mean?
Emil, please. I believe your
What I mean,
intelligence
Marta,
is
is I'm an orphan and everyone hates me.
What? No, I didn't.
What?
I know you are uncomfortable witnessing the first female interested in you complimenting another man.
No, you've got it all wrong. That's not what I meant.
Emil, do you have a crush on me?
No, I didn't say anything like that. Come on, Tenebrae, cut it out.
Yes, yes, understood.
Jellyfishing, jellyfishing.
Super fast jellyfish, super fast jellyfish. Jesus Christ! Oh, I gotta sit down.
Oh, good.
I'm so glad it wasn't RNG.
That was amazing.
Thank you.
Hey, Emil, about what you said earlier.
Never mind about that. It wasn't
Shut
anything
up already. Go
important at all.
away.
Not important at all? Oh, I see.
Go in the hole, Marta.
I'm sorry.
You're the special bait.
And I need a jellyfish to catch a frog. I've been very clear in my desires here.
That's right.
was quite a catch. No marlin I've ever caught can compare. It certainly
Oh, that's a
was
funny
yours.
thought. Like how
For a moment, I believed
I guess that just means that Regal is really good at marketing.
Yeah, it's like if the Apple company came over from like another world and merged with
Yeah.
ours, right?
It's like, wow, they got
Yeah.
good commercials.
I also kind of believe that because like one of the hilarious things about Regal being a prisoner wandering with the group throughout all of the first game is like he's clearly a very charismatic and capable businessman too. So I could imagine like, all right, I'm done with that. Now
put
let's
all my
go
energy
conquer
in
this
it.
new world.
Yeah. Also, I wonder how much truth there is in the fact that after a like near world-ending event, a mining company coming in and being like, "Hey, oh, you know all that stuff I broke?"
That's true. Hey,
good news.
Good news. I like that.
Yeah.
We solved it. Decoded. Okay. Gotta look at the side quest guide now. Alright, well, I think we've been going for about 3 hours because we started late. We have another Richter side quest that I think we can wrap up this one with, and it looks like it's shorter than the leg of the last one.
Okay.
Good? Alright. And then we can pick up back here in the main story on Friday. And we're already where we have to be, we just have to go back. Yes, Richter. We're doing the many faces of Richter side quests. We spent a lot of time in the last stream in the Belacryph Mausoleum.
What's going on over there?
The fortune
It's a
teller
very
at the
great
Oasis
theme,
is
yeah.
giving free readings. Everyone's lining up for tickets.
Look, a distraction.
Let's have a prediction
See ya.
of our luck.
It's not really my thing.
Aw, come on.
If you want to go, I'll wait for you.
Really? I'll go get a ticket then.
Goodbye.
Ah!
Oh, Jesus Christ!
You're in the middle of town?
It appears to be one of Aqua's servants.
Count me.
Meat.
It's a message from Aqua. Richter wishes to see you.
Is that what he meant?
He's at the inn. What will you do?
I'd like to see Richter.
It looks like it'll take a while to get a ticket. Is that okay?
Then would you mind if I took a walk around town in the meantime?
Not at all. I'll meet you back by the Shape of the Chosen, okay?
Sure.
Quick in and out adventure, 20 minutes tops. I hate that that Rick and Morty has gone such a way that I now feel shitty about quoting it. Well, yeah, but now she leaves because we want her to leave.
Yeah, but we gotta hold it against her because, you know, I mean, look, I'm holding everything against Emil. We gotta share the love a little bit.
That's her defining character trait. She
I leave.
leaves. Michael always comes back. Marta leaves.
Marta, mi hermano?
See you later, mon frere.
That's French. I don't even know where I know it from.
You wanted to see me?
I heard Aqua asked you to come to Triet. Normally, I would never stoop to asking for help from an enemy, but I need your assistance.
It must be convenient to have such a flexible philosophy.
Shut up, Tenna Bonehead. Master Richter isn't asking you.
What do you need me to do?
I'm not nearly as mean to you.
Feel
like I'm pretty cordial.
It's a really disproportionate response.
God, dude.
I'd like you to take me there.
This is a kid's game.
Okay, but why?
I'm looking for an insect that lives on the rosemary plant.
So you're a bug collector now?
Yes.
Indeed, it is a fascinating hobby.
Do you remember that episode of Friends? You work with robots? Yes.
Oh,
Yeah, I don't remember much about Aqua's character, Smidge. I think maybe because I am fairly certain that I skipped these side quests when I played it way back in the day, but I'm really liking the exploration of it that we're getting. Yeah,
joke.
I'd agree with that.
Let's go.
Not much of a comedian, is he?
That wasn't a joke.
This is
a strange response of you.
I am a comedian. I demand you save your laughs for my real jokes.
Please don't do that again.
Last time I was here, the rosemary was all withered.
You're welcome.
We only managed to find one plant still alive.
Is that so? I didn't see any.
We're very good at what we do,
I'll show you
Richter.
where it was.
Yes, thank you.
You told me to be a man, and after I stopped crying, I did that. Ah, but I caught it this time. There we go.
Okay, that's the stuff that I had before, too.
Yes. I think the other way is faster. Ah! What the hell did you do?
I'm hitting tables with my feet.
Destroy my entire apartment.
Yeah, it's a nice change of pace, I will say, being Richter.
Moderately better than Marta?
Yeah, moderately.
I'm sorry for using you as a guide, even though I insist we're enemies. What's with that face?
Nothing, it's just... I don't think I've ever heard you apologize before.
And I'm terrified of it. What's happening?
Apologizing to anyone but
Dogs and cats living together.
The world turned upside down.
Wow, I guess you really are perfect. I hope I can be like that someday.
I meant that as a joke.
Shut up, Emil.
What we've learned so far on this quest is Richter is not funny.
But Tenebrae is hilarious.
That's right. We knew that. That's not new information.
Let's go.
Music changed up on us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Love it. Yeah, he seems a little bit better to play as than Marta. Huh?
It's a little more reliable. But he won't. Not even a glass cannon, just like a...
Just a glass.
Just glass, yeah.
Okay then, I'll try to like them too.
There's no need to match my taste. There's nothing I despise more than someone with no individuality.
Oh, then I'll go on hating herbs.
Emil, that's exactly what he's talking about.
Oh.
Then I love herbs.
I don't know how I feel about herbs.
I am herbs. Am I herb?
Emil, are you just saying herb because it's in the dungeon? Herb.
That movie is almost 20 years old.
That really bumps me out. Remember that time they made a sequel that was completely descriptive of the way news would continue to devolve in the following years?
I really liked the sequel.
It was great.
It is. I saw it twice in the theater, I remember.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
I saw it once. It was like on the verge of a breakup. And I was like, this will be good. I'll go see Anchorman 2. And it was the right choice.
Yeah.
Yeah. It made me feel better about the whole situation.
I just needed someone to show me the way.
Emil is not
And then the
him.
second time was with somebody. I
Well
can't
aware
remember.
of that.
But it was at like, it was like at 2 in the morning. I went to go see Anchorman 2 at Fox Run.
I have a vivid memory of, I don't know if this is similar or different, but watching it over the summer in a dorm room because I was doing summer research and like there had been a power outage. So like it was totally dark, nothing else to do, just like watching Anchorman like as a local file on my computer.
When I fight, so.
It's a good way to spend the
Depending
evening.
on that,
Yes.
Fight with your own strength.
But I can't.
Yes, you can. Learn to defend yourself at a moment's notice. Don't get cocky just because you've got a special power.
Okay. I'm
But my
sorry.
power's really cool.
Teach you how to fight. So stop looking so pitiful.
Okay. Thank you.
And I'm sorry.
I'm sorry. Please love me, surrogate stepdad.
It's this deep in?
Yes, it's at the far end of the cave.
You saw all these dead plants, and you still had the resolve to search all the way to the end of the cave. Impressive.
Well, I had Marta and everyone with me, so...
We also took really long breaks to talk about philosophy and religion and stuff.
What's the insect you're looking for?
It's called the Angelatops. I'm looking for its shell.
The shell?
When the Angelatops changes from a larva to an adult, it leaves behind a shell. This shell resembles a crucius angel, so the Church of Martel uses it as a talisman.
So why do you need to find it?
That doesn't concern you.
Of course it concerns me. I'm the one showing you the way, aren't I? I'm sorry.
No, you make a good point. I plan to give the shell to a woman named Phaedra in Assalia in exchange for her spiritual apocrypha.
Are you getting that for Norton as well?
Aqua, what else did you say?
Forgive me, Master Richter.
My, look at the faithful servant now.
Quiet, you! Why don't you take a long
Go fuck yourself! Again, disproportionate.
Centurions, that is enough. Emil, I hope you'll stay with me a bit longer.
Sure.
It's interesting that after being, needled into going into Ratatosk mode at the slightest provocation, Richter lays into Emil and Emil doesn't switch.
Are you referring to Lady Marta waiting in Triet?
Yeah.
There were plenty of people waiting to have their fortunes told. We should have time.
It's not that. If she gets a bad fortune, I just know she's gonna grill the fortune teller with tons of questions. And even if her fortune's good, it's only gonna end up encouraging her.
Seems you've come to know Lady Marta quite well.
I've come to know that laugh of yours pretty well, too.
Oh.
The spiritual tome and the spiritual apocrypha. They both have the same kind of stuff written in them?
This book is about Spiritua. When the world was still split in two, she was the most famous of all the Tetha-Alan angels. I even heard Spiritua was once the chosen of Silverant. Is it true?
Yes?
History is not Emil's strong suit.
It's true.
Sorry. I didn't study as much as I should have.
Well, it's not exactly essential for everyday life.
You know a lot about history and all sorts of other stuff. That's really cool.
That's all they ever let me do.
Well, what do you mean?
I mean, forget it. It was meaningless research anyway.
We know he's a half-elf.
Right.
I let my guard down. Who cares?
Especially in Tetha-Ala, they were relegated to, research roles and sort of shoved into basement labs to do grunt work a lot of the time. We made it. Well, barely. We did it. We did it! We got the dark soul. Go away. Why can't we be friends?
This is the place.
All right, let's dig here.
Right.
Nice.
Love it.
Thank you. If we hadn't found any rosemary here, I'd be forced to start my search all over again.
I guess good fortune comes to good people.
Was that sarcasm?
Just a bit.
You got me there.
Oh my god, he laughed.
Oh!
You laughed.
Of course I laugh sometimes. What do you think I am?
Are you a robot?
Aye, robot.
Oh no.
Of course, it's nothing compared to my handsome chauffeur.
I'm about this close to
Jesus.
Anyway, you're taking that to Azalea, right?
Yes.
I'll go with you.
No thanks.
Why can't I go? I think I have a right to see this through to the end.
You don't even know what this is.
And you're not gonna know.
I will.
Oh, and now we get a quick jump.
I'm glad that they did that.
Oh, well, we had to go all the way back through the
from the other
fucking
one.
ruins.
Yeah.
I thought you'd know.
Huh?
Phaedra is the Chosen Colette's grandmother. She lives in the Chosen's old home.
Colette's grandmother?
Let's go.
We don't know anything about the attack on Lewin.
You expect me to believe that? The leader of the attack said the name Lloyd Irving himself.
Lloyd Irving!
Riding into battle on a horse.
Lloyd!
They literally call him Lloyd the Great after even 2 years.
The church has to compensate us for our losses.
Uncle Abba.
You?
Don't run from him.
Now there's a real monster. What is it? You want to kill me, do you?
For sure.
A little bit, at least.
Who took you in and fed you, boy?
Super resentfully. This is his uncle, if you hadn't gotten
Yeah,
that.
I got it.
I didn't come here to see your wretched face. You're nothing but a plague on us all.
How can you say such things?
Mind your own damn business.
Frank.
Anyway, think about what I said.
I know, I was just thinking the same thing.
Silent as usual.
More like Sadatosk mode, am I right?
Although it seems like he doesn't. I mean.
Don't want to rock the boat, hmm?
So I joked yesterday, like I have a feeling I know what the deal is with Emil and Ratatosk mode, right? But I will say that what's intriguing me is like you said that kind of offhandedly. I don't know if that was a clue or something, but I do feel like whatever's going on with Richter is maybe suppressing it or keeping him at bay or something.
Interesting.
But if you just shy away every time and never stand up for yourself, nothing will ever change.
He did kind of show up and meet Emil in that sort of suspicious first chapter of a JRPG way. It's like, what are you doing here and what is this meet cute all about? Really?
Right.
You're no better than a dog.
Because I don't think he's gone into Ratatosk mode anytime with Richter, except in battle probably, right?
I think that's right. Yeah.
I'm not a dog.
I'm not the one you need to tell that to. As long as you waste your time worrying about making others angry, your life will always be this way. If you don't speak up, nothing will change. Then again, if you don't mind being treated like a monster, feel free to ignore me.
Richter, not everyone can live the way that you do.
Super cool.
Many people in this world must make.
You're much better than me.
Are you going to stay forever?
He's not making compromises with the world, he's rejecting it.
Yeah, that was kind of my joke with Sadatosk, Smidge. I feel like he's more just like bummed out and retreating into himself here than really getting like angry or indignant. Which might be it if we think it's like powered by emotions. It's just not the right kind of emotion.
Yeah.
Retreating into his shell and playing the victim is what makes him feel safe. But that's not living. It's just wasting away till you die.
In a cool
I
way.
see you haven't changed a bit. So, does your visit mean you found the item we discussed?
Yes, I brought the angel atop shell.
You did indeed.
Here is the spiritual apocrypha.
Thanks.
I heard that a member of the
Goodbye.
Vanguard named Hawk has the deep sea scroll you seek.
Thanks for the information. I'll take you as far as Triet.
Okay.
Why don't you grow a pair, Emil?
Really? Even just one would be an improvement.
Oh, not the same VA for those two?
You should be able to find your
I
way.
thought Phaedra sounded
Thanks
familiar.
for your help.
Maybe it's just the wishful hearing, I guess, as opposed to wishful thinking.
Wait!
What is it?
I've always been afraid of my uncle. And I still am. And not just him. Everyone in Lewin, too.
That's not my problem. But from what I could tell,
I wonder
all of us
why they
seem to be
didn't get
afraid
them
of you,
back, because I
too.
feel like that was... This was prime time for, like... How many years after this was the first one?
The first one was 2003. This was 2008, so it was 5 years.
Oh, okay. So they might have gone on to bigger and
Yeah.
better things.
Smidge also mentioned, like, this is kind of similar to how the Final Fantasy series works, where there are, like, what are called mothership titles, like the big flagship numerical ones, and then there are sort of, like, spin-off or smaller ones. So this was sort of, like, classed as a little bit more of a spin-off and treated that way, even though it was, like, a proper sequel to one of the mainline games. So it might have been that just the hiring practices or the budget was different than what they had to work with for Symphonia.
And that was because I used Ratatosk's power back in Lewin.
He's feared you long before you ever made your pact with Ratatosk, for as long as you feared him.
That's not possible. Uncle Alba's always screaming at me, and
The smaller the dog, the louder the bark.
Uncle Alba's weak?
His actions mirror your own. You were afraid and retreated into your shell, so he did the same. You both do what comes easiest, but that won't change anything. I was the same once.
You were afraid too? What were you afraid of?
Humans. So I avoided and ignored them. But then, someone taught me that nothing would ever change if I stayed that way.
Who taught you?
Courage is the magic that turns dreams into reality. A friend, a foolish, naive friend with a few screws loose, taught me that. Courage is also what you need to break out of your shell. That's how you got Marta to join you. She opened up to you because you risked your life to protect her.
But Marta's so easy to talk to.
You think I'm easy to talk to as well? Get yourself together, Emil. You already know exactly what you need to break out of your shell.
A big
Courage?
That's right.
The Hammer of Courage.
It's very tiny. Can open up a walnut.
Like the Gigaton hammer, but micro.
Okay, I guess we shouldn't keep Marta waiting. Let's head back to Triet.
I can't wait to hear
We are literally in
We're
Triet,
here,
and they're having this conversation. Close, guys. You're close. Maybe she's in the inn. It's not a quest unless you go 5 incorrect places before finding whom you're looking for. Seriously. All right, we're going to do some rational reconstruction. The line at the fortune tellers is gone. She clearly already had her fortune. She got a bad fortune for the future of her love with Emil, and she threw herself into the frozen lake.
Into the fishing hole.
She was never heard from again.
Eaten by the jellyfish.
That's right. Oh, Smidge. The dream. Oh, okay. This is on me because I remember she said that she would meet us by the shape of the chosen, so and I knew where that was. I'm trolling the game when I should have remembered that. But we got to do that hilarious riff on Marta, so look.
It all worked out.
Yeah. We got to where we needed to go.
The fortune teller told me some amazing stuff. I've been dying to tell you. What have you been doing?
Making jokes at your expense.
Mainly.
Lady Marta, Emil was concerned about what the fortune teller might predict and found it difficult to return here.
Huh?
Huh?
Really?
Me?
You're such a worrywart.
Me.
But you can relax.
The coolest Ratatosk there is.
The Ratatuskiest.
Oh, we are?
Yes, the fortune teller said that in the near future, you're going to break out of your shell and become a new person. And then the two of us are definitely going to end up together. Isn't that great?
Break out of my shell? Yeah, I hope that comes true.
I'm so happy that you agree. I didn't know you felt so strongly about us.
Huh? What?
Is that what I said?
I didn't mean it like that. Marta, are you listening?
Do I ever? All right. That was definitely better than navigating the wind ruins.
I think I was able to bridge the gap between Richter and me a little.
I wouldn't be so sure.
He did laugh a bit this time.
That was a surprise.
And terrifying.
Who do you think his friend is? You know, the one he talked about?
I was a bit shocked to hear he had any friends at all.
Do we know
His
that
friend
quote?
must
Is
have
that
the
something you
patience
know
of a
for
saint.
playing the first game?
Not from the first game, but when he first met Emil and Lewin at the start of the game, and Emil was like even more of a coward, one of the first things he said to him was that same quote to kind of
Richter said
motivate
that to
him.
him?
Yeah.
Okay.
And he said the same thing, that it was something a friend of his with a few screws loose told him long ago, but we don't know who that was yet.
Gotcha.
But it has me interested. All right, folks, friendos, fellow gamers and thinkers, thank you for joining us this time around. Smidge, great chatting with you. Other great intrepid friends in the chat.
Pizzicato.
Newtonio, it was great seeing you. Yeah, and Pizzicato. So nice to have some great conversations going around these games and philosophy and a little bit of everything in between. And great to have this slug with me. He's going to be back for the Friday installment of the stream. So if you're enjoying the little bit of couch co-op, as it were, definitely please tune into that too. It's going to be at the same time, 7 p.m. Eastern. So have a good gaming adventure or two in between now and then. And if you want to ring in the weekend right and think about some video game storytelling, JRPGs, everything else that is With a Terrible Fate, meet us right back here, and we will look forward to it. Yeah, hope to see you again, Smidge. Hope to see you all.
Take care, everyone.
Next time.